Afternoon and good evening to over 1,400 distinguished colleagues, members of the Academy, and many longtime friends from all around the world. Welcome to Esri's second Imagery and Remote Sensing Educator Summit. I'm Lori Jordan, Director of Imagery and Remote Sensing at Esri.
And I'm Jerry Miller, Director of Education at Esri and also faculty at Johns Hopkins University. On behalf of all of Esri, we wanted to welcome you today, and especially to those of you who are joining us from 111 different countries, spanning multiple time zones. So thank you for being here. The focus of today is you, that is our remote sensing and imagery educators community. And Lori, I think there's someone else who wanted to join and greet our attendees as well.
That's right, Jerry. There's another very special person who wanted to join us today, but he couldn't. But he did want to say hello, and he also wanted to add his welcome. And since so many of you are longtime friends of his, we think he probably doesn't need any introduction.
Good morning. My name is Jack Dangerman, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to the Remote Sensing and Educators Conference. The purpose of this meeting is to get together, to share what we're all working on collectively and make some advancements, not just in the technology that underpins our work, but more importantly, how we educate people, how we bring new students in, how we build professionals in this rapidly growing and also urgently needed technology and science. Look, the last few years, we've made major advancements in new sensors, and they just keep going up. We're beginning to learn how to measure and observe and process with things like AI and machine learning, virtually everything that moves and changes on the planet. And both the temporal as well as the spectral dimensions are continuing to expand. At the same time, here at Esri, we've been building stronger tools to be able to ingest that information, to be able to manage the large volumes in the cloud with things like Kubernetes, big data analytics, and then analyze and turn it into actionable data with AI and machine learning, and also just simplified ways so that mere mortals can have access to the remote sensing data and implement it in practical ways on maps and in settings of decision making and in support of action like supporting fires or supporting floods or supporting disasters, but also just improving the way people do agriculture and forest management, land use planning. The whole world, which has historically been kind of researchy, nothing wrong with that, but researchy is getting connected into practical GIS tools that can take the measurements and take them right into the field and create actionable workflows, support actionable workflows with them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you taking the time to come to this conference. We have some great speakers, and we're looking forward to sort of this exchange where we all grow together. I want to say thank you again, and we'll look forward to working with you and hopefully next meeting, collaborating with you face to face.
Thanks, Jack. Well, let's begin and let's get started by taking a quick look at some of the goals that our team had in mind when we were envisioning the purpose of the summit. An overarching desire from the beginning here at the top of the list was to provide a platform or a forum for members of the Academy to basically share not only with us, but with each other, the amazing success stories and progress that you're making throughout higher education in imagery and remote sensing. We also want to discuss some of the methods and strategies for teaching that are evolving, that are very creative in this academic period of uncertainty as we face the pandemic, and also dealing with some of the issues and challenges that continue to persist. What can we do to help grow the importance of diversity within the workforce that we're training to be the future leaders of education, imagery, and remote sensing? And what are some of the challenges that we're facing as educators? This seeming tidal wave of new software and capabilities that are inundating us on a continual basis. We'd like to share with you some of the new capabilities that are just now being developed by Esri, and you're going to be among the very first people to see some of these new tools and actions. Those are on the agenda. And this will give you a voice as far as an input into the software development priorities and the roadmap to make sure that we're focused on the right capabilities that you need so that we can help you be successful and we can be of service to you. And lastly, and I'd say probably most importantly, we want to learn from each other. This is part of embracing continuing education as part of a lifelong learning as we all aspire to be students for life. So Jerry, I know you have a very compelling and rich agenda you want to share with us, but maybe just before you do that, there are 4 very special people who have been instrumental, along with their supporting organizations, to help us bring this summit to life. Jerry, could you tell us a little bit more about them, please?
Absolutely, Lori. So we wanted to extend a special thank you to all of those wonderful colleagues from the academic community that you see on the screen. This event simply would not be possible without them. They were with us all along the way, from planning this event, brainstorming, thinking through all the sessions that we're going to include in the event. They were part of numerous meetings that took place, and also they are either hosts or moderators or panelists in some of the sessions that we see coming up in these next couple of days. So special thanks to Jarlath O'Neill-Dune at University of Vermont, Dr. Tommy Jordan and Dr. Margaret Madden at University of Georgia, Center for Geospatial Research, as well as Karen Schuchman at Penn State University. So thank you, wonderful colleagues. And also just a special shout out to our Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, ASPRS, for supporting the summit and for being an integral part of it. So thanks again to those wonderful colleagues, and you'll see them as we go through the event. So we would like to also learn a little bit about you, that is the audience who is here today. So what you're going to see is a number of polls, or a poll that comes up with 3 different questions on the screen. So if you wouldn't mind answering these questions, and the first one is, what best describes your level of familiarity with ArcGIS? And I know this is kind of, it could be a little bit vague, but obviously pick the option that most describes you. And then there are a couple of other questions in terms of which remote sensing software packages you use today, as well as which drone processing software packages you use today. So let's take half a minute or so to answer these questions, and we'll share the results here in a little bit. So folks are still entering answers. We can kind of see the bars going up and down or side to side. And we'll share them here in a second. All right, so let's go ahead and let's share the results. Looks like most of the polls are done. So great. So most of the folks have sort of that intermediate knowledge level of ArcGIS, lots of experts as well, some beginner, and not too many are new to GIS. There are only a few that are there, so about 1%. That's wonderful. Again, lots to learn regardless of all of these sort of different levels of familiarity. And also lots of different packages that are out there when it comes to remote sensing, when it comes to drones technology. And we'll discuss as we go through some of the sessions today, and even as we're kind of brainstorming these sessions, there was this notion that, yes, of course, there's lots of options out there, but there's value to having using one package that kind of has all of these different wonderful capabilities. So some of that is going to come through as we go along. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the agenda for these couple of days. So today we have some wonderful lightning talks planned. There's a session of lightning talks tomorrow as well. The way we structured it today, we're going to focus a little bit more, as much as we could, of course, on teaching and learning. Tomorrow it's going to be a little bit more research oriented. And we have 3 different working groups. So the topics of these 3 different working groups, so drones is one topic, 3D imagery, and GeoAI, and we'll define what GeoAI is. But these are sort of the topics that we came up with, again, in collaboration with our colleagues that you saw earlier on the slide, and just seeing questions that are coming to us from the academic community. So we'll have lots of expertise as we're going through these different working groups and these discussions. So we look forward to that. And today we'll conclude with a closing session, a little bit more activities, a little bit of networking, a little bit of hearing more of your thoughts in terms of what you think about discussion so far, as well as things that we could be doing tomorrow. And speaking of tomorrow, so another session of lightning talks. Then we have a couple of special sessions. One of them is how the Academy works with Esri. And what we really mean by that is when we think about the Academy, we think about the academic community. And lots of the questions that we get from the academic community are things like, I think there's ArcGIS on campus. Sometimes I don't know how to get access to ArcGIS, or I don't know where to go to for help, or I don't know, I know we have the technology on campus, but I don't know exactly what's included. And also, as an educator, what are some of the resources that are out there to help me get started or supplement my curriculum and so on? So we'll take a look at that in this session. And we also have a session on what's new with Esri imagery and remote sensing, and Peter Becker, our product manager, is going to join us for that. And we'll have that discussion. We will come back to results from our working groups on those three topics, so drones, 3D, as well as GeoAI. And then we'll conclude with a closing panel, and Dr. Dawn Wright is going to moderate that for us. So lots of excitement. And so, Lori, there's really lots of capabilities that are packed into the ArcGIS system when it comes to imagery. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the imagery system at a high level.
Sure, Jerry, thanks. Yes, I think maybe the analogy of a tidal wave is very appropriate. There's so many things that are happening and continuing to be developed right now. But we can simplify this into a streamlined framework of 4 broad categories of capabilities, the way we think about the technology. So let's start here in the lower center of the screen by taking this massive amount of content streaming in from all different types of sensors from space, air, and ground into the cloud, where we can manage this as dynamic services, making these data available, many of the sources in near real time on demand as an information service. Then moving clockwise over to the left, we then want to take the raw data and turn it into meaningful information products, authoritative baseline products, foundation content, base maps, site models, and even derivative products. For example, terrain elevation models, digital surface models that could come from LiDAR, stereo, structure from motion, and so forth. Then moving around clockwise in the upper center, we want to then perform analysis and do observations on these data. We want to unlock the secrets that are contained in imagery and remote sensing to find meaningful information that allows us to monitor, visualize, inspect, and derive further intelligence from the raw data. And lastly, here on the right, we want to find these special patterns that are emerging over time. And this is very exciting because it allows us to see trends. And one of the most interesting aspects of this is what we call predictive analytics, where we want to be able to predict the future by looking at what happened in the past, where might it happen in the future, what might it look like, what might it contain. So there's some very amazing capabilities that are happening right now throughout this entire ecosystem. But all of these things get translated and mapped into some very specific products that Esri designs and builds. So Jerry, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that and some of the key areas of focus in 2021, particularly for the academic community.
Absolutely. So yes, indeed, there are a number of key areas of focus. They're kind of at a broad level. There are areas of focus for imagery and remote sensing for Esri, but of course that trickles in to the academic community as well. And of course, we'll continue to talk about things like collection and processing and data management, as well as analytics and visualization and so on. And there are a broad spectrum of applications that are available that give us the ability to work with all of these capabilities and to focus on these special areas. And some of these applications you might have seen already, such as ArcGIS Pro. Perhaps you've worked with Image Server or Image Analyst, maybe even Drone to Map. And there are some exciting new capabilities that are coming down, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about them as we go through the different sessions. SiteScan is one of them, which is a complete end-to-end solution on working with drones. And another new one that is going to be coming out currently in beta is is ArcGIS image for ArcGIS Online. And what this gives us the ability to do is to do raster analytics in the cloud. So it's completely SaaS-based, and we can do analysis, we can save our results. And again, lots of exciting capabilities that are coming down the pike. So we'll cover them as we go along. And with that, we wanted to proceed with our first session, so our lightning talks. So we have 5 different lightning talks that are 5 minutes or so long. And at the end of the lightning talks, we're going to have a Q&A session. So a few of those wonderful educators that submitted the talks are going to join us, and we'll have a discussion as we go through the lightning talks. And during the Q&A, do feel free to type questions or to ask questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. And of course, we'll try to get to them, to as many as we can, but we will see how many we can. And if not, we'll address them later. And the moderator for this session is going to be Nigel Brown. So you see Nigel now. He's our partner manager for global imagery and remote sensing. And he's also the brain power behind this summit as well. But Nigel, he comes to us with 25 years of experience in remote sensing. And prior to Esri, he was a director of sales and partner enablement at Envy as well. So Nigel.
Jerry, thank you so much. It's great to join everybody here today from Boulder, Colorado. We've got a great lineup of lightning talks for you this morning. And for our first lightning talk, we go to Burlington, Vermont, and the University of Vermont, and Jarlath O'Neill Dunn.
Hi, this is Jarlath O'Neill Dunn. I'm the director of the Spatial Analysis Laboratory at the University of Vermont, and in this presentation, I'd like to attempt to answer the question, what are the remote sensing fundamentals? We're teaching remote sensing during an incredibly exciting time. Drones, such as the one I'm pictured with here, have democratized remote sensing, giving us all the capabilities to go out and map our landscapes. LiDAR and active sensing technologies have changed the way in which we can capture data about the Earth's surface. And automated feature extraction technologies have allowed us to process billions to trillions of pixels to accurately map land cover and other features in ways that we never thought possible. It's also a challenging time to be teaching remote sensing. We're doing so during the midst of a global pandemic. There are dozens of remote sensing software packages that have regular updates, and the way in which we obtain information has changed. It's no longer through just conferences or journal articles. We have to stay on top of the latest developments by monitoring social media. Remote sensing has always been a challenging topic to teach. In the early days of film, we'd have to cover the principles of chemistry. Physics and the electromagnetic spectrum have formed our foundations, and now we have to cover new properties of sensors such as LiDAR. We've always discussed human cognition and the elements of image interpretation, and then how we attempt to automate that through various classification algorithms. We have to get across the principles of different data structures. We teach our students how to use technology, how to work with different software packages, how to store and manage data, how to download data from different portals. In these days of drones, we're teaching them flight planning, along with the corresponding rules and regulations. On top of this, we need to teach them domain expertise, how to read the terrain, maybe the elements of forestry, or civil engineering, or marine biology. And in today's world, other topics, such as privacy and equity and justice, deserve an equal footing. It's not surprising that we find ourselves struggling to keep up with all this technology, that we wonder what we should be teaching our students. And I think it really comes down to, what are the remote sensing fundamentals? What do we need to provide to our students so that they can adapt and thrive in a challenging and changing world? Remote sensing has always been both an art and a science, and my concern that in today's world is we focus too much on the science side, specifically the data science side, and that we've run a risk in the last decade of creating a new batch of professionals that are very proficient in processing large amounts of data using fancy algorithms, but may lack the domain expertise and qualitative skills needed to solve the pressing problems of the future. I believe the best thing that we can do to prepare our students for tomorrow is to focus on remote sensing tradecraft, coupling education with experience theory with application, and domain expertise with technological know-how. It's so compelling to want to focus our curriculum on the high-end technologies, such as the new generation of artificial intelligence and the amazing things that deep learning algorithms can do. The reality is that it's probably only a matter of time before these fancy AI algorithms tackle the very simple problems, such as mapping all the buildings in our planet. What happens when we need to tackle more complicated tasks, ones that require not just strong programming skills or expertise in a software package or an algorithm, but true domain expertise, true understanding of the data? In short, what happens when we need remote sensing tradecraft? I'd like to walk you through some of the recent projects that our team of faculty, staff, and students have carried out that illustrate the importance of remote sensing tradecraft. Accurate wetland maps are incredibly important for both ecological and regulatory reasons. Wetlands are some of the most challenging features on our landscape to map. The automated approaches that we employ require an understanding of spatial filters, data fusion in which multispectral imagery, LiDAR, and climatic datasets are integrated into a single workflow. Topographic indices need to be calculated at the appropriate resolution, and we need to employ segmentation algorithms so that we can extract the features with both precision and accuracy. Our tree canopy assessments are a powerful tool for communities to help them understand how their tree canopy has changed over time so they can make improvements to their green infrastructure. We're entirely reliant on publicly available imagery and LiDAR in order to carry out these assessments. Because these source datasets have been acquired by different vendors and processed to different specifications, determining true change from simple shifts or differences in the data is extraordinarily challenging. Accurate mapping of the change can't be accomplished just by developing an amazing training dataset and applying it to an AI algorithm. It requires extremely careful attention to detail, using morphological routines to maximize the strengths of the input datasets and minimize their weaknesses to represent change in a realistic fashion. When we employ drone technology to detect invasive species along utility corridors, we can apply our domain expertise to fly our drones with multispectral sensors just as those species are greening up, avoiding the need to purchase cumbersome and expensive hyperspectral sensors. When it comes to using drones to carry out critical infrastructure inspections, it requires a combination of the theoretical foundations of thermal imaging combined with hundreds of person-hours gaining experience to fly in these extraordinarily challenging environments. In the end, we need to keep in mind that what we're looking to do is to provide people with actionable information so that they can make better decisions. In this example, we're looking at the city of Boston, whose tree canopy has remained largely stable over the past 5 years. But when we dig into the data a little bit more, summarizing tree canopy change by neighborhood and breaking it down by land use, we see that in many neighborhoods, substantial tree canopy loss is occurring on residential lands, which is great cause for concern given the high proportion of residential land within the city of Boston. So what are the fundamentals? And perhaps more importantly, what should we be teaching? Well, we've got to emphasize the cognitive sciences, not just the elements of image interpretation, but more recent understanding of how we as humans identify features in remotely sensed data, such as scene gist. We have to give our students the opportunity, the ability to apply their knowledge and incorporate domain expertise. And we've got to do this in an environment that allows them to tinker, to make errors, and to learn from those. Theory will always be important, but we can't let it overtake our coursework. There are materials that we can get rid of, such as discussions of pixel-based classifiers, which are a far cry from the human cognitive approach that is used in object-based or AI algorithms. Finally, we can reduce the number of software packages our students work with. Buttonology is not what we want to teach them. The software will be constantly changing, and I think this is one of the exciting things about ArcGIS, that we have a single platform that we can train our students on from their introductory GIS class all the way through to their advanced remote sensing class.
Well, Jarlath, thank you so much. What a great way to kick off the lightning talk sessions this morning. I could really sense within the audience a lot of nodding in agreement of people seeing how you described both the challenges and the opportunities that face the community today, particularly around the vast amount of data that's available, the numbers of remote sensing software products that are available, and also some of the opportunities that drone, LiDAR, SAR, and new optical sensors bring to the community. Esri certainly supports the idea you're promoting of teaching that remote sensing tradecraft, and really a key goal of the summit here this week is to show how ArcGIS can really be that complete platform to enable you to teach both the introductory to GIS class all the way through to advanced remote sensing classes. So thank you. Now we head over to Ireland. I want to introduce Dr. Conor Cahalan. He is from Maynooth University, and he's going to talk about satellite skills. Thank you.
Welcome to my presentation. My name is Conor Cahalan. I work in the Department of Geography, Maynooth University. I'm part of the 5S Space Surveyors and Students, STEM and the Sustainable Development Goals project. And I'm going to talk to you a bit today about Satellite Skills, a self-directed student learning app using augmented reality and ArcGIS Online. We were SFI Discover Programme. SFI are Science Foundation Ireland. They're the largest research funding body in Ireland. And the Discover Programme is pretty much designed to get people interested in STEM, attract people who weren't normally involved in it. And the SFI Discover Award runs every year. And the 2019 awards particularly encouraged applications with a space focus. And they were linked with the European Space Education Resource Office and the Irish branch of that, which is ESERO Ireland. Now, my interest, I'm a remote sensing lecturer in Maynooth University. I teach undergraduate and postgraduate. I'm not an astronomer. I'm interested in remote sensing, Earth observation, and primarily the Copernicus program. So I am keen to see people using this new form of open data for as many things as possible. And I'm really interested to see, can I introduce it to second level students? So there was a number of partners on the application. We had an award. We stuck in with the Department of Geography. That was me. The Department of Education, who train many of the teachers who go out to second level teaching. So they gave us invaluable teaching feedback. TU Dublin, the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. Esri Ireland, which was originally Aileen Crosdale, and Rachel Abernathy has also joined the team. Ordnance Survey Ireland, which is the National Mapping Agency. And the Society of Chartered Surveyors, which is one of the biggest professional bodies in Ireland. It's the one that has all the geomatics professionals in it. We stuck in an application. What were we funded for? Well, we were funded for STEM outreach using Copernicus and focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. Work Package 1, I'm not going to talk to you too much about today. That was Jack. That's the traditional GeoMentor approach, using our big volunteer group that we have in the Chartered Surveyors and partnering them with schools to train the trainers. So we go out to the schools and we give sessions or give classes for them. And we also give teacher training events. What I'm talking to you a little bit about today is the second one, Work Package 2, which is the app. That's much more on the self-learning side, where instead of the learning trickling down to the student is in charge of their own learning as citizen scientists using their phones and augmented reality. And that's being led by Jonathan Fall, who you can see in the corner. The focus, again, is the Sustainable Development Goals. We all have them in mind, the United Nations goals for a fairer, better future. Everyone's familiar with them, but many less people are familiar with the Global Geospatial Information Management and the fundamental geospatial data themes that the UN have also been involved in identifying. So these are the fundamental geospatial data sets that are the building blocks that people use to derive anything else that they need. So all the other data sets that we need to tackle the SDGs, these are what we use. And as a remote sensor, working with Copernicus and different satellite data sets and drones and aircraft and lasers, etc., I know how much this technology has a role to play in developing these data sets. So whether it's land parcels or land cover, elevation and depth, geology, water, building, 3D models, you name it, this is all here, okay? So Work Package 2 is this bottom-up approach. And again, this is Jonathan leading this. So we saw the success that Pokemon Go had when it came to, the spatial data involved in that, location, images, you name it. So we wanted to see, could we use augmented reality as a learning tool? We focused on the junior cycle, which is 13 to 16-year-olds. And in Ireland, for a number of different subjects, science and geography for one, a student must identify and pick a project of their own choosing. So two of those for the geography, they do this in second year when they're about 14 or 15, is geography in the news, and the science equivalent is science in society. So both of these have a clear link back to the Sustainable Development Goals. The app that we're trying to develop is this one-stop shop for the students. So all they need to do is come up with their own idea. But we then take care of all the other stuff. So the nature of science, what's your hypothesis? Then you design your investigation. You select the data that you need. You then analyze the data. And finally, you have to communicate your findings back to the people. So in this case, it's the students who are being graded. And that approach and that whole timeline very much mirrors the European Space Agency Climate Change Detectives Programme. So it has added appeal. Any student who does a good job for this could also enter into that European competition. And it's a very prestigious award. So what have we done? Well, our initial development is we have come up with this game approach where we have 14 tasks, and each of those tasks is related to one of the UN GGIM themes, whether it's soil or water or elevation, etc., and a bit of satellite data. So it's all augmented reality. In the right-hand side, you can see a little bit of the app playing out. This is the satellite radar one using Sentinel-1 data. So in this, we're hoping to teach the students a little bit about how satellites can see through clouds, generate mapping data sets, and then in an augmented reality game environment, the student will have to unlock or earn this data set by taking your 3D surface, looking at the flooding polygons that come back from the Copernicus Emergency Mapping System, which again comes from Sentinel-1. And then the game approach is they have to pick out all these different flooded buildings and say whether they're flooded or whether they're not. And then the student earns the buildings and settlements data sets back in their ArcGIS Online account that they can use for their project, right? That's the game element. And in doing this, they learn a little bit about Copernicus in doing so, because there is those guides and external resources that I mentioned. The student collects everything that they need for their project, and then they can create their own story map for the submission. At the minute, on development side, we're piloting it on Android. We've also started co-developing on iOS, so we're going to have it available for both of those. But it's very much a co-creation approach as well. We're not just doing this in our ivory tower. We're working with students and teachers around the country. So we got great help in terms of the computer science class and transition year. Transition year is about 15, 16-year-olds as they move from junior cycle to senior cycle in Ireland. And we also have the Maynooth University and the TU Dublin undergrad and postgraduate students giving us feedback there as well. We have great teaching feedback as well. So we have not only the 5S core team, but also the Bachelor of Science in Education and the postgraduate masters. The games we have at the moment, there's about 4 of them. On the right-hand side, you can see this is the game that teaches the students a little bit about satellites. So the student, first of all, learns a little bit about the orbits. Then they become the satellite and they see how they build up a picture of the Earth. Again, this augmented reality. After a certain few stages, then they're shown a biomass layer, and their interactive element is they have to try and interpret the color legend and the color ramp and see what areas have the highest biomass. They mark that up, and then when they successfully finish that, they are given the land cover and the land use layer. And that's another one of the games. So the testing at the moment is kind of to ensure quality and functionality. And we're hoping to pilot this in schools in September 2021 with a big promotion over the summer. And the last stage then is we have to present it. So bringing us back to the start. This is a typical submission from a student for junior cycle, Word document, a few pictures off the internet. Is there a better way? Of course there is. And that's where the ArcGIS for Schools program comes in. Ireland, like most of the rest of the world, has, free access in schools to ArcGIS Online platform and all the different data sets. The student has the data sets that they've unlocked back in their ArcGIS Online account. And then can they present it differently? They use a story map and they present their story map to their teacher as part of their submission. So that's it. If you liked what you saw, please do contact me. My name is Conor Cahalan at mu.ie or 5ssurveyors@mu.ie. Thanks. Bye.
Mark, We certainly did like what we saw. Talk about a fun way to learn using augmented reality. The students in Ireland are going to be super excited and will love learning using this technology. It's great to see the way you've leveraged the Sentinel data from the European Space Agency, and also the way you've partnered with both the Ordnance Survey of Ireland as well as Esri Ireland. And certainly that augmented reality is something that's front of mind for Esri too. In October, we announced the availability of ArcGIS Maps SDK for game engines. And within that, we support both Unreal and Unity engines. So finally, I want to wish you good luck with the pilot in September. I know it's going to be a lot of fun. Now we head to Cleveland, Ohio, where we'll hear from Mark Guzlo at the Lakeland Community College. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Guzlo. I teach geography and geospatial technology at Lakeland Community College, which is located in the Cleveland, Ohio area. Today, I will present to you, wait, how much land is managed? Remote sensing students have the answer. And this was from an experience in a remote sensing class I taught in the spring of 2019. We have 4 major areas of focus in our department: geography, general education, geospatial technical skills, experiential learning, and career development. And I think the most exciting thing about teaching in this program and teaching in this department and in this discipline is mixing those 4 things together in different ways in different courses. Remote sensing is an exciting class to teach, in part because it demands so much of the students and demands so much of the instructors in terms of being able to reconcile the way we think about data, and students really for the first time in terms of our program anyway, getting into much detail about how they understand, interpret, and use imagery within the context of GIS mapping. We adopted the textbook Imagery and GIS for the first time in spring of 2019. And the 4 content areas of this textbook really match the goals that we have for students in terms of how they learn to use imagery in the context of GIS. Most of our students will be going out and working for engineering firms, for government, for nonprofits, doing things like watershed mapping, stormwater mapping, utility inventories, and things that basically require specific applications to imagery use, but that also require that students have the theoretical underpinnings to understand imagery and also a deep understanding of the processes of analysis that relate to that imagery. I particularly like the way the textbook deals with classification schemes. And so there's a whole chapter devoted to classification within imagery and how classification schemes can be used to derive classes for particular projects or for use for more general purposes. So we do a couple of labs that integrate the National Land Cover Database before we started working on the project. And this helps students understand that just because they get an output in ArcGIS Pro, or at that time we were using ArcMap, doesn't mean that it's a legitimate output that they can do something with unless they understand what they're doing with it. And so by working on classification schemes, it's a great way to bring together the way they interpret and understand the data in the context of their projects. We had a small class that semester with only 5 students, plus the work from our GIS lab assistant who had just taken the class a year previously. What we set out to do was to determine the answer to this question: how much land in a park system is managed versus unmanaged? And so we looked at the Geauga County Park District, which is the county right next to where we are here in Lake County, Ohio. And we wanted to add some information to a problem that they had in estimating how much of their land was, quote, managed. And they had estimated that 3% of their total land area was managed, but they didn't really have a good systematic way of coming to that determination. So we wanted to put GIS and remote sensing to use to help them determine that. We had worked with the park system previously on some projects, so we had a pretty good understanding of what GIS data they had and what was missing. I'm going to take you now to the story map students created, and I want to encourage everyone to look at the story map on your own time as well. So the objective again was to determine the amount of land that is managed versus unmanaged in the park district. This is the classification scheme the students ended up adopting for use once we had already used the National Land Cover Database to categorize land into big categories. Then we wanted to go a little bit further than that in our classification. We used 1 meter NAPE imagery, National Agricultural Imagery Program data, 4-band as our main data source, plus other orthophotography from the state of Ohio and lots of ground truthing field data collection and integration of the mapping students did hands-on in the field using Collector app, Survey 123, and so on. We did unsupervised classification using standardized methods across all parks. Each student mapped 3 or 4 park units. They all downloaded individual tiles for those units, mosaicked where they needed to, clipped them, ran raster statistics, and then processed that data. They came out then in the end with maps that look something like this. This would be a good example of one of those maps that then put the land cover into the categories for the National Land Cover Database. Manual classification then was used to clean up the data, to provide missing data. For example, the park system did not have any road layers, so we created them. We created them basically through either on-screen digitizing, using a combination of different types of imagery, or by going out in the field, riding bicycles, walking trails, walking roadways, and doing all those kinds of things. Students slogged around in wetlands. They became familiar with the data, and they identified lots of challenges. For example, there were parks where the parcel boundaries didn't match what we expected to see once we got into the GIS data. So the students got into the parcel mapping history and got a better understanding of where there were either updates needed or where other issues existed. One of my favorite aspects of this project is that students went out and looked at all kinds of different conflicts where we had mixed pixels, we had poor interpretation of things because of wetland conditions, lots of wetlands that were even being mowed that probably shouldn't be mowed. Where students found vegetation had died. It does this. Imagine what that does on the imagery. And the students have to look at the imagery from the point of view of why is it interpreting it that way when that's what you have on the ground. This is a good one here where this is a wetland area, but it actually is mowed. It's in a low-lying area. So having more GIS data might help the park system make better decisions about how it uses, how it manages that land and can be used in their, in their overall management processes. The overall findings, students found that 16% of the land can be classified as managed according to unsupervised classification. But that's before we go into it and look at all those challenges where we have misinterpreted pixels and mixed pixels and all kinds of other issues going on. And so from their field work and their manual classification process, the students ended up with 9% managed, which we think is a fairly accurate number. We were able to account for how much land is mowed. The park now knows how many acres it has that are mowed, how many acres are covered with trails, how many are covered with parking lots, roads, structures, and so on. So it gives us a good sense of then how to bring that information together in new ways. And also students had to go out and do lots of field reconnaissance and collection. They went out in pairs or 2 or 3 students at a time and basically did a lot of data collection from that. They presented their results at the Northeast Ohio GIS Symposium in May, which paired up with final exam week. So that conference became the final exam. Each student presented a poster, and then the group presented the story map. And that's all I have to say. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'd like to hear if there are any comments or questions. Thanks for your time.
Well, excellent job, Mark. Congratulations on adopting the imagery and GIS textbook in your teaching at the community college level. It's really great to see you adopting ArcGIS Pro in your classes, and also to see just how your students are able to leverage not only the NAPE data, but getting out there in the field and using the field mobility solutions to put data into ArcGIS Online and then create the story maps to present their findings. It was really interesting to see just how much they're able to help the park administration understand how much land they really do have under management, clearly 3 times what they initially thought. So now let's move over to Florida. We're going to Orlando, and we're going to hear from Dr. Bo Yang at the University of Central Florida.
Hello everyone, I'm Bo Yang from University of Central Florida. It's very nice to present in Esri Imagery and Remote Sensing Educators Summit 2021. Today, I'm going to talk about our NSF project, the Participatory Drone Mapping Program for Coastal Management and Research. I want to mention this project is one of the first attempts to use UAV remote sensing to assess the seagrass condition along the west coast. We all know that the seagrass habitats as a very important component for the coastal ecosystem, affords lots of functions and also a critical host for a variety of the animal or the marine algae. Traditionally, we use different kind of remote sensing method for accessing the coastal ecosystem. Those include the satellite remote sensing. Although the satellite can retrieve the historical data and have a temporal revisiting cycle, but its spatial resolution is relatively coarse. The aerial data, on the other hand, can provide very high spatial resolution, but it's very expensive because we need to rent the airplane and hire the pilot. The UAV remote sensing has been developed really fast in recent years. It is similar to the aerial remote sensing. It can also provide a very high spatial resolution, but it might need some extra work for the image processing and data validation. Here is some example for compare the different data source. We can see from the satellite, we can barely see the seagrass bed's boundaries. So if we look into detail, due to limitation of the resolution, we cannot see the detailed distribution or the shape or the texture of the seagrass meadows. The drone image, if we're mapping on the low altitude, we can see if the water turbidity is good, we can see the seagrass blades very clear. And if we're using some software like Esri Drone to Map to stitch the drone imagery into a bigger, like also mosaic map, we can see the seagrass spatial distribution and also the spatial texture very clear. So that's an advantage of using the drone for the very high spatial resolution. So this is a collaborative project, and our group at UCF is responsible for the UAV remote sensing and geographic fieldwork. So our monitoring sites is from Alaska down to San Diego. We have different sites along the entire west coast. And we collaborate with our local partners to collect the drone data for the entire US west coast. And we have one more site in Canada, which will be mapped by drone by our collaborator in Hawkeye Institute. So here is an example. So we went to the site and we will fly the drone. And because you know when we fly in the drone, we might need more the reverse correction and registry image registration. So as a result, we use some of targets like buoys on the water surface, and we also deploy some of the red buckets on the land to use as a GCP to do the georeferencing. And also those targets can enhance increase some of the variability on the image, so the image can be well registered over this area. And also we will collect some using the high performance GPS to collect the ground control points to increase the location accuracy. Meanwhile, when we fly in the drone, that our research partner will collect the in situ the biological sampling data, includes the disease detection, qPCR, eDNA. This can as a ground truthing. And here is a comparison between the we can see this is a very high resolution of the UAV mapping, and compare with the traditional the satellite data. It affords the very high spatial resolution, very detailed histogram, and offers more performance when we do the classification and image segmentation. Another part of this project is a citizen science research. So basically, after we're doing the mapping, we will also train our local partners. They will, for each of the sites, we will train several people for flying the drone and they can help us to collecting data when we are not there. So after first round of initiation, our research partner can continue to collect drone data, high resolution drone data for us. So here is our training modules. It includes like the basic drone setup, how we can manually fly, control the drone, and use the automatic mapping software. And also there is the training material includes some basic GIS processing, like how we use the software like Esri drone to map to stitch drone imagery into a big also mosaic map. And also we leave some self-study, like 10 to 20 hours self-study for them to prepare for the FAA Part 107 license, so they can independently fly the drone and collect data for us. The training is basically carried out during the fieldwork, but also afterwards, our partners got lots of practice using the drone to collect the GIS data as well. So here is some example collected by them, and we can see after training, they can collect a very good drone imagery. And we use some online, like the ArcGIS online, to share those data and perform some online analysis. Here is a feedback, like the training survey right after the participants take part in the drone training. And we can see they got a very high score on the drone course organization, and they are not that confident to fly the drone independently. But remember, this survey has been taken just after the first year of training. That time they just took the training course and not feel very confident. That's understandable. But right after that, during the COVID, the second year, we cannot travel to the site. And everyone, after rounds of learning, they all of them get very kind of comfortable to fly the drone, so they can continue to collect data for us. This is some screen like photos during the 2020 when we cannot travel. Our partner in Washington, California, and Alaska, they all can collect the drone data for us. So we have summarized this kind of drone training efforts and make it as an open access, like the journal. And this kind of effort has been highlighted as a journal cover story. And also we make our training course available as an open access training course online.
Bo-Yang, thank you. What a great program you've put together here. Clearly a great success. It's good to know that we have a better understanding of the health of seagrass across the West Coast. And in this case, drones clearly were a good choice, giving you not only the spectral and spatial resolution, but at a price that was affordable for the project. It was really good to see the students gain confidence in their ability to pilot their drones, and also their utilization of drone to map and ArcGIS to create their imagery products. And liked the fact that they were doing field work, getting that validation through boots on the ground, or in this case, as we saw, waders in the water. And again, want to thank you for making the training open. You mentioned some challenges that the pandemic had brought with collaboration. After the break, we'll be hearing about SiteScan for ArcGIS and how we can support the academic community with cloud-based flight planning, capture, processing, and dissemination tools. So now let's move over to Athens, Georgia for our final presentation of the morning, and that is from Dr. Marguerite Madden at the University of Georgia.
Hello, my name is Marguerite Madden. I'm a professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Georgia and the director of the Center for Geospatial Research. And my co-authors are Tommy Jordan and Sergio Bernardez. My talk today is an active learning environment, engaging students in image data collection, analysis, and visualization. My objectives in my teaching is to build a foundation of concepts and theories in geography, such as scale, landscape ecology, and human-environment relationships. along with an understanding and competencies of geospatial technologies, including remote sensing from drone to satellite imagery, photogrammetry, and geovisualization. I'd like to engage students in real-world applications, and one I'll talk about today is human-elephant conflict in the Kavango-Zambezi region of South Africa. The students work with real data, exploring linkages of elephant movements to urban development, local communal farming, and climate change, and hopefully towards mitigation of the conflict and aiding decision makers. I'd also like to note in automation that we remember the power of visualization. Seeing is believing and understanding. Given the need for geospatial imagery processing and products of advanced analyses, from image acquisition to classification to feature extraction, including advanced techniques such as deep learning, I think we also need to remember that it's important to detect and understand the image features before we process. Basic visual image interpretation is critical to automation, modeling, and the assessment, most of all, the assessment of the output quality. We bring our life experiences, perceptions, values, everything we've ever read, places we've been to, we bring that all to our computer screens, and we have amazing brains. We can understand the images, and hopefully we can teach algorithms to do the same. At the University of Georgia, Dr. Sergio Bernardez has led a group of us to develop the 3DIG system, 3D immersion and geovisualization system, using a number of different internal grants from the UGA Center for Teaching and Learning. We start with image acquisition with the drones, do photogrammetric structure from motion processing to create 3D point clouds and models, gaming engines to then bring those models into virtual reality and augmented reality headsets. And also he built an augmented reality sandbox with the help of students. And then the display can be in the sandbox, can be on tablets or on our multi-panel video wall. We fell in love with drones in 2013 when Tommy started buying DJI Phantoms, and we have some Mavic Air, and also the most recent purchase was the Matrice 600 Pro as part of the 3D system. Students are very interested in the technology. We do some hands-on training, we do demonstrations in our classes, we do outreach to the community. This is a class that Sergio put together, and they literally opened the box, took the Matrice out, started assembling it, and then also mounting these different sensors. I have to calibrate the data, the image, all the imagery and data are co-registered, and get some real-world experience. This was assessing vegetation damage on Sapelo Island following Hurricane Irma. Most of the vegetation damage was due to salt spray. And creating 3D models. This is a building on campus, and bringing those into the virtual and augmented reality headsets. I believe in the power of the wow experience. It really engages students and inspires, I think, learning everything from the technology and the programming to the applications. Sergio's done a lot of work with working with middle school and even elementary students to introduce them to the technology. And my real-world application is working in the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, the confluence of 5 different countries and national parks. And most of our work is focused in Victoria Falls, which is undergoing a number of different conflicts with wildlife, but especially with elephants. An elephant can come and raid a crop. They can destroy a crop, in a whole year's of income in one night. They walk down the streets, the main streets. They have attacked people. So the bulls are the biggest problem. Their biological strategy is to get as big as they can once they get kicked out of the family groups until they can be big enough to challenge the bulls that are in the national parks and breeding with the family groups. So we identify problem bulls, dart them, put the GPS collar on them, and we have started in 2015. We have 15 bulls collared and 1 lion. And unfortunately, we've lost quite a few of the bulls to poaching and also cyanobacteria toxicity. But we have a few that the batteries are still working. We get points every 15 minutes and sometimes every hour and sometimes every 12 hours. We can view the data on our mobile apps and see where they are at all times. We also have the data that have been downloaded from the collars. I use them in my classes, and they do a capstone project at the end of the class using the data, looking at the distributions of the different elephants in the wet season. They have to classify the land use and the habitat conditions. They compare that with the dry season movements and patterns. They do animations of their movements over space in 2 dimension in the wet season and the dry season. And then they've also done space-time aquariums to look at the data in 3 dimension. You can see when the elephants are interacting with each other and what their patterns are, whether they're regular or widely distributed or widespread. We're working with the local people. They're growing chili peppers and making mashes of them, and this is a deterrent to the elephants. This is an elephant this is happening now, is raiding the crops there, had been in the airport. They, our team darted them, rubbed it with chili pepper, and he has not been back to the airport since, so it seems to be working. So in conclusion, our classroom concepts, theories, and exercises are developed in the research, students working with real data, and then hopefully moving their findings to actually be used in the community to assist and influence decisions. So thank you for your attention. And also thank you to the Elephant Conflict Research Group, especially the support by Connected Conservation, who helped to house us and give us transportation and buy the collars. And we're a very interested and engaged research group. And here are some references from my work and our students' work. So thank you very much.
Oh, Marguerite, thank you. What a great presentation. I was always aware of human-elephant conflict, usually being the humans on elephants, but clearly there's also the opposite direction as well. So it was great to see. I was also very impressed with the 3D immersion and geovisualization setup that you have there, and I just loved the term you used of the power of wow when it came to augmented reality. So there we had 5 great presentations. If you think about it, we had presentations on teaching from K through 12 to community college all the way up to 4-year university classes, and really great presentations. I wanted to thank Jarlath, Mark, Marguerite, Connor. My apologies for the nervousness and name mistake there, and of course to Bo Yang. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A roundtable. I'd like to bring Jarlath, Mark, and Marguerite into the discussion. Welcome, all 3 of you. Thank you so much. If we focus some discussion on really what Jarlath posed, which was, what are the remote sensing fundamentals? If you think about it, drones are definitely democratizing remote sensing. We're definitely experiencing this space renaissance where it seems like every week, almost every day, new satellites are being launched. I think today Airbus are launching their 30 centimeter NEO satellite, one of 2 that is going up. And then we continue to see this fast-paced increase in both spatial, spectral, and temporal resolution. So when it comes to the basic fundamentals, I guess one of the things that Jarlath highlighted really was, what are the challenges? And he mentioned the global pandemic. I'm curious, Mark, when you look at that from teaching at the community college level, how did that impact you?
Right. That's a great question. And, hopefully we've learned a lot of the adjustments that we can make in order to address the pandemic, and we can apply those lessons and strategies moving forward, because I think the reality is that this is going to be with us for some time in some way. As a community college, we have students from many different backgrounds that come from a whole large metropolitan area, 6 or 7 counties within the Cleveland area. And so distance learning and remote education became our most pressing task at that time. And I was in the middle of teaching remote sensing. And so we shifted over to our virtual client, which raised all kinds of other issues because we really were not ready at that point to be doing all those things at once on our virtual machine environment. So the college this summer has agreed to invest in a complete upgrade of the system. Moving ahead, the good news is that we will be much better at the remote learning. And for the first time in the fall, I will be able to do a truly integrative online GIS introductory course that will engage hopefully students from all over the metro area. People could be an hour and a half away and not necessarily have to come to campus. And hopefully we won't run into some of those same challenges.
Yeah, I know we had to react very quickly. I know that Esri was supporting many of the academic institutions around the world with either temporary licenses or additional licensing just to cover the challenges that came up. And I know in the original first poll that we had this morning, it's very clear everybody's using a whole range of different software products. Marguerite, what's your take on different software for different parts of courseware? What's your experience?
Yeah, we had some of the same challenges that Mark had, pivoting very quickly. And then in the fall, we were a hybrid instruction model. So online, some people were in the classroom, asynchronous and synchronous. So we also had to deal with changing all of our exercises to be able to be ported to individual laptops. We had a variety of different capabilities and capacities and Macs and PCs. So it was a learning experience for everybody, and frankly quite exhausting. So I had to, as an instructor, be conscious of that and just work with everybody individually as they were going through their issues with software.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jarlath, another thing that you mentioned in your presentation was how challenging it is to stay current these days with all the different new sources of information. What are your main go-to sources these days?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, Nigel, and I think there's always the temptation to get wrapped up in the latest piece of technology and integrate that into the curriculum. And I do find everything from YouTube to social media to be great to figure out what's happening. I think we're in a situation right now, quite frankly, where our peer-reviewed journals, especially in the UAS and drone space, are months, if not in some cases years behind what's actually happening in the field. So I think looking at LinkedIn, the Twitters, right, the social media is a great way to stay current, but at the same time, I try to sort of temper that by saying, let's just not get wrapped up in this sort of shiny new toy. And is this really going to be a fundamental skill that's going to help my students be adaptable and flexible in a changing world? Or is it just something that looks neat?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm always reminded of, just because it's on the internet, don't believe everything you read kind of thing. So, yeah, I totally get it. You also introduced this concept of, we really need to focus on remote sensing tradecraft. And with that, you see it as a coupling of education with experience, theory with application, and domain expertise with technological know-how. Clearly, tradecraft is important, and I'm curious to see, because when we hire people, trying to find those with that remote sensing tradecraft is particularly challenging. So curious to see your thoughts on that. How are you progressing with that?
Yes, and it's something I think that's really challenging to develop in the classroom. And I'm really fortunate that I run a research lab, and Each semester I have anywhere from 20 to 30 students who work with me. Quite often they're doing the sort of grunt work of remote sensing, if you will, cleaning up land cover data sets, doing edits. But in the process, they develop a tremendous understanding of the landscape. They really understand LiDAR data when they stare at it for a long period of time. They really understand imagery. And you only develop that tradecraft by, I think, spending that time looking at the landscape. And one of my concerns is sometimes we have a lot of people who are looking at code and not spending enough time looking at pixels.
I'm seeing the other two nodding there. So Marguerite, agreement there?
Oh, absolutely. We also see quite a few of our master's students specializing in geography and, say, GIS, remote sensing, or geospatial analysis, but they come to us from different departments. So they may have their bachelor's degree in a different domain, and that's a really nice combination. Within our department, we also have, I think, a diverse faculty. So we will often have students who are, say, interested in climate change or atmospheric science or human geography, and then they are taking the techniques classes. So the stovepipes are breaking down. I really like that. I think that helps our whole applications and development.
Excellent. And Mark, any final comments on that?
Well, I think one great help is the way software has evolved and changed. And we've seen this incredible convergence of software platforms. In this case, our shift over to ArcGIS Pro has made a huge difference. And it's also presenting some interesting challenges. I spent 20 hours writing a lab assignment at the beginning of the semester, and it took the students 45 minutes to finish it. And it would have, in our past, and ArcGIS desktop days, it would have taken several hours. And so I started building speed bumps into the assignments that required them to get up and walk across the lab and have a conversation with someone else, or if they're doing it remotely, do it through messaging or what have you. And so the challenge is the technology is becoming seamless. The data, we're grappling with that. It allows us to bring more and more data and technology into it. We will be using drone to map in the fall in our courses and beginning to bring in drone data for the first time. So it does give us opportunities, but man, those challenges are tough, because if we have a 17 or 18-year-old student, they can fly through the lab instructions and click those buttons faster than I can keep track of them. And we all know that we have to slow down and think through the problems that we're working on.
Yeah, and I think that closes in on that final point in Jarlath's presentation, where I think you said, ArcGIS is a single platform to train our students on, whether it's from the introduction to GIS course all the way through to advanced remote sensing. And suggestions there that you had were, there are materials that you can get rid of, such as pixel-based classifiers, potentially reducing some of the software packages, and obviously to stop teaching buttonology. Are you seeing within your teaching that you're able to reduce the number of packages today, and how does that help you, Jarlath?
Yeah, I think we are. And I find that the more I try to pull away from the buttonology, the deeper the students get into problem solving. And really our goal is to be able, I think, to send students out into the workforce who can adapt and understand the intent. When someone says, I need to know this answer, they'll be able to execute a workflow to find that answer. And they're probably going to do that using a software package or a workflow that we didn't teach them, because things change so quickly. And if they can go deeper into the tinkering, the discovery process, the mistake process, I think they'll be better positioned to do that. And to the extent that we can pull back on those detailed instructions, that's when I feel that my students are really, really learning. They're not always happy during that phase because it's frustrating, but it's the phase that I think develops that deep understanding and also the confidence that they can solve problems without someone telling them what needs to be done at every step in the process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we certainly see at Esri that we're providing this ArcGIS platform, which we believe will solve those needs. Not always are you going to use every single piece of ArcGIS for your remote sensing classes. There's probably 90% of everything that you need within the platform today. But for one or two areas like hyperspectral processing and currently SAR processing, you'd probably bring in a partner technology like Envy or SARscape or other tools. Marguerite, are you seeing similar trends, or is it still a real big range of software that's being used for your teaching?
Well, I think it's a range, and there are other faculty in our department who have different platforms that they're using, different softwares. But I did teach Intro to GIS last term and had 50 students, and the range of skills and expertise was just mind-boggling. So, I really appreciated the ability to work at all levels. And if a student was able to go on and interact with some other software and go back and forth between ArcGIS Pro, then they're able to do that.
Excellent. Good. My apologies. My watch is now buzzing, which means we need to take a break. But first of all, thank you to all three of you for wonderful presentations, great discussion. For the audience, please, if there's additional questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will answer those. But we're now going to take a break. It's a 15-minute break. But during that break, we will be playing a 7-minute introduction and overview of GeoAI video, which will be very useful to you. So please take a break and join us in 15 minutes. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.
Next, let's take a look at geospatial AI, our recent advancements, and what it can do for you. Let's get started by defining what it is. Geospatial AI applies spatial machine learning and deep learning techniques to help solve complex problems and derive deeper insights in very powerful and innovative ways. And as we do this, we are expanding the power of GIS itself to support two kinds of systems: in assisting humans, which we call human in the loop. So the expertise of humans comes in along with augmentation from AI, and then building fully autonomous systems itself. ArcGIS is an end-to-end geospatial AI system. By that, what I mean is right from the time you access the data and prepare it for labeling, all the way through model training, QA, and validation to inferencing and being able to inference at scale in production environments. And then, of course, the loop back into taking the right decisions based on the outcomes from these inferencing methods. All of this is possible within the system, but when you look at it from a user point of view, you can experience geospatial AI in different ways. First, it starts with the core of it, ArcGIS.learn. It's a module within the Python API. And within that, you can do everything that I showed in the end-to-end system. And then if you went beyond, we have pre-trained models that are readily available for you to deploy into production. We spent a lot of compute and curated data to come up with these models and validate them. For some of you, it'll be ready for use. For some other cases, you might want to bring in your own data and do some transfer learning. It's like a localization process, you can say, and then you can validate and deploy it to production. And then there's the aspect of bringing these models as ready-to-use tools within ArcGIS that you're always familiar with, analytic tools. There, it's like geoprocessing that is coming through. And lastly, some of you are building ready-to-use apps and solutions. And in this case, the fact that it has AI in it is unseen to the user. You just use it because it's better. Today, we are excited to introduce a few of our users, developers, and data scientists to show you the use of geospatial AI in real projects. I'd like to introduce Rohit, who's going to take us on a quick tour. Rohit?
I'd like to take you on a tour of geospatial AI. And as we go on that tour, I'd like us to make stops at 4 cities around the world where you, our developers and users, are taking AI to the field and solving real-world problems. So let's get started. When we talk about geospatial AI, it really spans ArcGIS, but at its core, it begins with the ArcGIS Learn module of our Python API. This module makes it super easy to train a wide variety of geospatial deep learning models on your data. You can bring in data from ArcGIS, feed it into any one of the 30 or so geospatial deep learning models that we have support for, fit the model to the data, and once you're satisfied, save it out as a deep learning package that you can then use with ArcGIS. This module has support for oriented and overhead imagery, 3D point clouds, featured, tabular, and time series data, and even unstructured text. We have models for nearly every kind of feature extraction task from imagery, including models for object classification and object detection, and for pixel classification and instance segmentation. We have recently added models for edge detection that can be used for extracting residential and agricultural parcels, a state-of-the-art model for road extraction, as well as models for change detection and for image translation, both from other images as well as from images to text, that is, image captioning. For 3D data, we have the point CNN, point cloud classification model. And at this release, we have added support for processing mobile point clouds, as well as the ability to use multiple models with one point cloud for categorizing buildings, trees, and ground points in this example. To complement the geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro, the fully connected network allows you to take data from feature layers and feed it directly into a deep neural network, giving superior results compared to most machine learning models provided you have enough training data. Speaking of which, the machine learning model, we call it ML model, lets you easily integrate ArcGIS with any classification, regression, or clustering model from the popular scikit-learn library. Another feature that I'm very excited about is the addition of the time series network to ArcGIS Learn. This model brings the power of deep learning and convolutional neural networks to time series forecasting. Now, geospatial data doesn't always come packaged in file geodatabases and shapefiles. It's often in an unstructured format such as text-based reports. That's another area where deep learning has done exceedingly well. And at this release, we have added an entire submodule called arcgis.learn.text for natural language processing. With the entity recognizer model, you can extract geospatial information from the reports that you just saw and bring them to a map. The module also has models that can take in incomplete addresses and determine the country they belong to with near perfect accuracy, or automatically correct spelling mistakes in addresses and normalize them to a standardized format that's suitable for geocoding. But you don't have to train all such models yourself. The text submodule lets you use open source NLP models for these tasks and more. And what's great is that such models are available for English as well as several other languages. So to recap, ArcGIS Learn is a module of ArcGIS API for Python and has support for dozens of geospatial deep learning models. I can't wait to see what you do with them.
All right, so welcome back from the break, everybody. We're going to proceed with our first working group, but before that, we just wanted to mention that there were a few questions that came in the Q&A that absolutely we will make recordings, all the recordings available from the whole summit, so both days, as well as we will follow up on some of the wonderful questions that came in via blogs, particularly on some of the specific topics that we have available. So no worries, and we were able to address a lot of the questions. The ones that we couldn't, we will address them during this follow-up. So as we go through the rest of these sessions, please do keep the questions coming. We want to keep that conversation going. So what we're going to do in this first working group, we're going to focus on drones. And you heard Jarlath mention earlier that drones have democratized the way we do remote sensing, and they have presented so many wonderful opportunities in recent years, but also some challenges along the way. So what we're going to do in this session is kind of discuss and take a look at what are some of these challenges and some of these opportunities, and the way the working groups are structured. So we have a team of experts. So we have someone from the academic community. We have a couple of subject matter experts as well that are going to help with this discussion, as well as help address the questions that are coming in the Q&A. So again, please do keep the conversation going. And the moderator for this session is going to be Dr. Lane Graham. She is a solution engineer at Esri on the national government team. And along with all of her experience, she is a certified FAA UAV pilot. She's a social scientist. She's also a Smithsonian Research Institute, and she's going to lead us through this session.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I'd like to introduce our team today. We have the privilege of having a couple of experts with us. We have Dr. Jarlath O'Neill-June that I'll let introduce himself. Jeremiah Johnson is our technical expert, and we also have Nico that will be monitoring the chat. So Jarlath?
Hey, great. Hey, thanks, Lane. Wonderful to be with you and the Esri staff here. So Jarlath O'Neill-June, Director of the Spatial Analysis Lab at the University of Vermont. You may remember me from the lightning talk several minutes ago. I established our UAS or drone program here nearly a decade ago in response to a major tropical storm that damaged our state. And I felt we really didn't have the remote sensing assets we need. And now I do everything from conduct research on the role of UAS in disaster response to running workshops and educational programs from K through 12 through undergraduate students all the way up to working professionals.
Thank you. Jeremiah?
Hello, everybody. I'm Jeremiah Johnson, and I'm an imagery solutions architect here at Esri. I got my start in the manned aviation field doing manned mapping, then got into unmanned. I hold a pilot's license as well as a remote pilot's license, and I work out of Esri's Berkeley office.
Thank you. Nico?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nico Bonafu. I'm part of the imagery and remote sensing team, SiteScan Park JS product team based in San Diego, California. I'm also a remote pilot and a certified flight instructor for manned aircraft. And I'll be answering your questions over chat today.
Thank you. So Jarlath, I'm just curious how drones have fit into your educational curriculum and how your work with drones and education and research have really come to be.
Yeah, I mean, talk about an exciting opportunity, right, Lane? The fact that we can now introduce students to remote sensing data acquisition all the way through to data processing to serving these up in web apps. And I'm just amazed when we run these sort of middle school workshops, and in a couple days we can have kids collect data with drones and then produce a web app showing a map of their school and bring in ArcGIS online services to look at how it's changed over time. I think it's so exciting for us in the learning community, but of course a lot of challenges as well.
It's so inspiring to have you here to talk about how that's fit in the practices and policies and best practices to impart to us all. At this time, I'd love to poll the audience to see how you all are engaging with drones in education. So please take a minute to answer the poll that's on your screen. We'll leave it up here for about 60 seconds and then talk through some of your responses. We're excited to see how many participants here are engaged in both research and education, and just really understand some of the challenges that you all are facing that we could speak to today in terms of implementation and some of the challenges that we can address with our hardware and software as well. Just a few more seconds left on the poll. Awesome. So in terms of our first question, are you teaching a drone program course or course module? It seems that most haven't decided yet, but a fair number of you already have a program going or planning on implementing one within the first year. And so Jarlath, I'd turn to you now and just ask, for those that haven't decided, could you walk us through some of the challenges that you've had in terms of implementing a class or a program?
Yes, and thanks, Lane. It's great to see so many people have. And for those of you that haven't decided, I think it's very worthwhile, but it's not without its challenges. And the challenges, I think, encompass a number of areas. First, something that I really didn't anticipate was the risk management side of things, specifically within our institutional bureaucracies, right? You're going to have to likely look at, first of all, do you have insurance to fly your drones? Do you need risk management approval, right? How is your institution going to handle these things? And many universities, we're just close to airports and we operate in controlled airspace. Then you're going to have to manage your equipment, your battery fleet, and you're going to perhaps look at needing licensed and trained personnel who can supervise these operations. And that's before we even get into the geospatial aspects, which is where a lot of us want to be.
Absolutely, thank you. And in terms of participants that have engaged in drone research or are thinking about implementing one, how would you kind of say in terms of the research versus the education apportionment, how might those be complementary?
Yeah, we were really lucky. In our case, we were able to get research funding, and that's where we started with our drone program. And that really allowed us to make a lot of mistakes earlier on that I think were less critical than if they were in an educational environment, and to develop those expertise and to get through a lot of these institutional roadblocks that we had along the way. I think those roadblocks are being removed, and there's certainly good ways to go about it in starting from the basic level. And the other nice thing now, right, is compared to when we got started a decade ago, the cost of these platforms has dropped considerably. The great work that you folks at Esri have done on the software solutions have made it easier to incorporate drone technology into your curriculum.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And in terms of the final question, what challenges did your institution face in implementing a program? Lack of trained personnel, hardware, software, education materials for the course, institutional support or policies. Do you have any tips or imparting words, Jarlath?
Yeah, I think I answered yes to all of those. And there's a number of things that I think I've really benefited here at our university. One is having a dedicated staff member who is our UAS lead. And that has helped us throughout our program, right? Someone who can really keep track of the systems, who knows the regulations inside and out. Second was really just getting in with our risk management folks and finding that we could be also useful to other groups on campus and using our flights for them. And I think that led to a sense of trust and building that collaborative relationship. And then to the extent possible, leveraging our existing sort of hardware, software, and IT infrastructure, and not really thinking that what we're doing with UAS is any different. And we had those hurdles early on where people would say things, well, we need regulations on campus to ensure that people don't fly drones near to the dorm windows. And I said, well, don't we just have a regulation that sort of bans any imaging in that particular case? And so I think pushing back and making sure that we don't reinvent the wheel when we can leverage existing policies.
Absolutely. And that brings me to a question for you, Jeremiah, in terms of ways that we can kind of help as a company to enable. What are our drone solutions that we have available today?
Yeah, to help answer that question, Lane, I'm going to share a slide that I have prepared, kind of talking about two of the solutions that we're promoting in this space. The first you might be familiar with, which is ArcGIS Drone to Map, which is desktop drone imagery processing. So this gets installed on your desktop computer, your laptop. You can take it out into the field and pop the SD card in from the drone, process data offline. However, something I want to talk to you about, or talk to all of y'all about today, is SiteScan for ArcGIS, which is relatively new to the Esri ecosystem. It's cloud-based, scalable drone processing. So if you are looking to take processing from single computers up to scale, maybe you have multiple students or researchers all processing data at the same time and want a single place to store that data, that's where we really want to offer SiteScan as a solution to that problem. Something else is that both Drone to Map and SiteScan for ArcGIS have special education pricing. So, if this is something that's interesting to you and your organization, this is something we certainly want to talk to you about, as we really think that SiteScan for ArcGIS and some of the more scalable enterprise tools that we have available within the cloud solution could really move the needle in terms of how educators are using this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. That's important to have just an idea about the solutions that we have available. And in terms of the challenges that might be faced, Jarlath, and implementing this and in the classroom, could you kind of describe just the lessons in the curriculum side of teaching these students and researchers how to use drones and program policy consideration?
Absolutely, Lane. And I think early on where we found the real challenge was sort of buttonology overload, right? And so we were using different apps to do flight checklists, and then different apps to go ahead and check the airspace, and then different apps to go ahead, or different procedures to submit things to risk management, other software packages to process the data. Each drone had its own flight planning software and execution software. So there was just so much going on, right? And this is what I talked about in my lightning talk, this overwhelming sense of so much buttonology and just trying to figure out all these different applications rather than doing the sort of deeper learning, if you will, to get into it. And I think what's really exciting about some of the Esri solutions sort of are how you're envisioning the end-to-end things in terms of going from the planning stage, right, of your flight, and maybe you need to ensure that you assign the appropriate personnel, all the way through to managing your equipment, which is crucial for drones when we're dealing with lithium-ion batteries and you want to make sure you're maintaining your fleet. So I think, Jeremiah, I'll turn it over to you to maybe you can give some sort of insights, especially in terms of the new packages that you folks have available that I think many educators are not familiar with, on how you're developing these software packages to allow people to more easily go from flight planning all the way through to data processing.
Yeah, thanks, Jarlath. One of the things that we realized quite quickly is, you can have the best processing system in the world, but if you have garbage data coming in, you're going to get garbage data products coming out. And so to help assist our customers, we have a flight planning application that can be used for both the drone to map local processing solution as well as the cloud solution. And again, I have a slide here. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly to kind of run through this. But this is the SiteScan flight planning application. It's an iPad app that's connected to the cloud. And you can see here we have different flight templates that pilots can use to create a variety of different flight modes or methods of capturing data as simple as possible. And what we've done here is we've created some tried and true overlap settings, side lap settings, elevation settings to help ensure that our customers are getting the best data products out of the images that they're collecting. Because it's cloud connected, the flight plans that one person creates on one side of the world can be executed by somebody else on the other side of the world. Just as long as they're both in the same organization, they can execute each other's flight plans. This is also a field data management platform. Those of you who have gone out and collected data in the field know that you're not just one flight and done. Usually you're doing multiple flights, maybe different flight types, different elevations, or altitudes. And the worst part is coming back to the office with an SD card full of 3,000 images, and then you have to sort out which images go to which flight. One thing that SiteScan does is it associates the images that were captured. It knows because you flew this flight plan, and it knows which images it took for that flight plan. It's going to automatically associate each batch of images with each flight, which will make processing the data a lot simpler. It's also keeping track of your fleet. So something that Jarlath mentioned is it's very important to know, when you're moving up from one drone, two drone to 3, 5, 10 drones, fleet management becomes very critical. Which drones are flying where? Are there, maintenance that's going on with the drones? Pilots, are they certified? When do their certifications expire? Are the drones registered? All these have become very important, and this is something that we want to make as automated as possible within SiteScan. And of course, with organizations like Jarlath mentioned, having anytime illegal gets involved, it can put a speed bump or maybe a wall in front of you when you're trying to create a drone program. One thing that we're trying to make really easy for our organizations is establishing safety as a priority. So one of the things is creating a mandated pre-flight checklist form. So that's unique to your organization, that comes up anytime you intend to take off. You have to fill out the checklist, and that checklist gets saved in the cloud and can be exported, reported on, etc.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So there are a couple of questions coming in through the chat, and I'm going to kind of consolidate them here for Jarlath. So some of the questions are around what types of sensors do you recommend to start a remote sensing class? And then kind of how can you utilize the drone data that you're capturing? What types of imagery products are coming out for your work in the education realm, Jarlath?
Yeah, and I think especially those of us like me who come from sort of, I would say, more hardcore remote sensing backgrounds, one of the mistakes that we can make is really focusing on sort of high-end sensors, right? To think that we need multi-channel, multispectral sensors or hyperspectral sensors, and we lose a lot of the perspective on what the true value of drone technology is, which it gives us very high spatial resolution and very, very high temporal resolution. And what we found in our work is that this opens up just a whole host of amazing opportunities. You can just take, say, invasive species mapping, or looking at other species and flying at the appropriate time and green up in the spring or during leaf senescence in the fall. You can see so much detail. And in addition, with the spatial resolution, we can often tell species by their morphology. And I find that's incredibly useful in teaching our students some of the key principles around things like forest type interpretation, things that we have perhaps in the past looked for multi-channel sensors. And so I really encourage people to sort of be very open in using some of these low-cost products out there that we can quickly fly, we can easily process, and we can turn into orthorectified imagery. One of the challenges that we face when choosing drone platforms and drone sensors is that very low bar. We can get in with some great products, and then as soon as we want to jump into the multispectral sensors and RTK GPS accuracy, you're going to pay for that, and you're going to pay a lot more. But you can do so much with those low-cost systems.
And to that, Jeremiah, could you just provide an overview of what types of sensors that we support in our photogrammetric processing?
Absolutely. So in both our local and our cloud processing options, so both drone to map and SiteScan for ArcGIS, we support your classic RGB imagery. We support multispectral, so 4-band, 5-band imagery in both platforms, as well as thermal imagery for mapping. And to kind of piggyback on what Jarlath had said, as those of us who started in the industry early on, RGB was relatively expensive. I remember when we were putting low resolution GoPros onto the bottom of drones to try to collect imagery that way. And as the technology has advanced, as the hardware has scaled, we've seen obviously the cost come down. Multispectral used to be a lot more expensive than it is today. And I think we're going to see the same with a thermal, and then eventually perhaps hyperspectral once the weight and the cost comes down pretty significantly.
There's another question that's come in that I'd like to pose to Jarlath here. So Greg's asking, he has a number of challenges managing data in classes where students are collecting and submitting lots of drone data and projects. So the question, I guess, to you, Jarlath, initially, and then perhaps to Jeremiah, are there features both in your curriculum that you've implemented and then in SiteScan to Jeremiah that could kind of help with the management of multiple data layers that are streaming in and projects from students?
Yeah, and I'll just echo sort of this struggle, and especially when early on in our curriculum we were very much focused on desktop processing, right? We would go out and fly, everyone would come back, and then they'd process the data on their workstations, and the only solution we could find is that we just got to make sure we time this with lunch, and then you run into IT issues where you find out if someone doesn't log into the computer, it resets and kills the session. So I think some of the exciting stuff that we're seeing now are cloud-based solutions, which are much better suited for our educational environment, where students can kick this off, perhaps let it run at night or when they're not active, and step away. So Jeremiah, I'll turn it over to you because I know there's some really cool stuff coming, or actually is available right now within SiteScan.
Yeah, the SiteScan was developed first and foremost to solve this problem that Jarlath is talking about, where we had customers that wanted to that needed drone imagery, that saw the value in drone imagery, but had a multi-point solution. They had a drone and maybe a flight planning software over here, and maybe processing software over here, and then a Dropbox or a Box account to upload data to share with their colleagues. And so that was the initial problem that SiteScan was built to solve, was to try to create this streamlined pipeline. And one of the ways is by putting it into the Amazon cloud. We actually have we can create processing servers at a snap of a finger that can process the batch of images that get uploaded. And so what this means for our research community is, say you're out in the field, you have your iPad, you're out collecting data. With an internet connection, with a cell connection or a Wi-Fi connection, all you have to do is upload the images, and then they begin processing immediately. You don't have to run back to your computer and kick off a series of batch processing to process your data. All of that data gets processed immediately, and once it's in the cloud, it's available to your whole organization at once. There's no more uploading or sharing of the data. Once it's up there, it's up there. And so I know that we have research taking place in different areas, remote areas, urban areas, and just being able to simplify that data capture and process stage is just it becomes very powerful when you have it put it in the hands of these researchers.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Jarlath, there's a question that came in from Stacy that I think will be great for the broader audience here. So she asked, one of the biggest hurdles to implementing an active program is working with, high risk management department at the university, and that drones are using, highly controlled and restrictive practices, sometimes policies. So flying drones on campus, for instance, what are some of the tips that you have for working through this type of barrier? And also to add another question, what are some of the resources that faculty have to get certified or work with, the broader campus departments?
Yeah, well, first, Stace, it's been a while since we've connected, but great to hear from a familiar person, an old colleague. So one of the things that I think we did well early on is we actually brought campus risk management out to fly alongside us. And the thing about drones is once you get people outside and you get them flying them, everyone loves them. And in that process, we walk them through our flight checklist procedures, all of our safety procedures. We showed them our evasive maneuvers. And then we actually did some data collection on campus that was actually of value. We took a construction site and did some updated mapping, and it was useful to the contractor. So I think those types of activities where you can engage people and show them that you can operate safely is a nice way to get buy-in. When it comes to faculty sort of getting trained, so we think it's a good idea, although the FAA regulations have some educational exceptions, good idea to have Part 107, which is the FAA licensed UAS operators within the United States. That is just a textbook exam. You go to an FAA testing facility, it takes about an hour and you pass your test. I would say that doesn't make anyone really qualified to fly a drone. It really makes sure that you understand those regulations. And the FAA has a lot of great materials online, and there's also many companies that offer sort of short courses on that if you're interested.
Excellent. Thank you, Jarlath. Jeremiah, questions come in about basically utilizing the cloud to process imagery. Do you have to wait in a queue? How does this work with scaling? And is there a cap on the images that you can upload?
So one of the beauty of SiteScan is that as long as your SiteScan subscription is current, we allow unlimited processing and storage of your data in the SiteScan cloud. So we want to make sure that there's no thought process in your head, or like, oh, should I process this data? You should always be uploading and processing the data, just because it's there and you have unlimited processing. One thing that I kind of touched on but didn't fully explain is the scalability of the cloud, and that means that when you upload those batches of images, say you flew 2, 3, 4 times, each one of those images are going to get its own processing server essentially assigned to those images. So Lane had mentioned queuing. We don't actually have a your data is not getting queued in processing. They're all getting processed simultaneously. It doesn't matter if you have 1 pilot, 2 pilots, or 20 pilots. So that's just kind of a, as I guess, weight off the shoulders from a timing perspective. You don't have to worry about somebody else's data getting processed before yours, or one flight getting processed before the other, just because it's all streamlined. It's all running in parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to that point, Jeremiah, thinking Jarlath about kind of ways to take that initial output and then maybe leverage it into additional analyses utilizing geospatial software and that higher spatial resolution. Could you give us a couple examples of ways that you've done this in your class with students to understand, now that you have the imagery products, what's the next step?
Yeah, and I think what's really exciting about drones, right, is we can go out to an area that we know and we understand. We can, for example, take a look at different tree species or different types, and then we can fly different sensors, and then we can look at those data and we can pose questions to them as why do they look this way? And then what's wonderful with all of the great information you folks have in the Living Atlas, right? We can stream in NAPE imagery or Landsat, and we can really help the students understand the benefits of spatial resolution, the benefits of having additional spectral bands in Landsat, and understand the trade-offs and limitations of all these different platforms. The drone may be great for getting high spatial, high temporal resolution imagery, but the footprint is really small. So from an educational perspective, we can really bring that out. And it also allows us to get to the idea of when should we use automated feature extraction? And I often sort of pose this to my students, think how long it's going to take you to spin up your object-based or AI system to count all the trees in this image. You'll be done with that in a manual method far, far sooner than any automated system. And so automated approaches are great, but they're not the appropriate solution in all cases.
And that makes me think too about a question that just came into the chat that kind of is in line with this, and that's about accuracy. Not just accuracy perhaps with the models that we're creating, but accuracy with the drone collections themselves. Jeremiah, would you mind speaking a little bit to ways that we can ensure that imagery is more accurate?
Yeah, accuracy tends to be a rabbit hole, but let me, give my little elevator pitch on drone accuracy. So when you're collecting data yourself, and you need to think about how, number one, how the data is being collected and how accurate the sensors are that is, taking place during the collection. There are a number of different ways to solve the accuracy problem. So first of all, if you go out and you fly and you create an ortho or a 3D model, that model is going to be accurate within itself. It's going to be fairly accurate within itself. However, the second you place that orthomosaic on top of your GIS or on top of a base map, you're going to see a little shift, a 1 to 2 meter shift, and that's just due to the inaccuracies of civilian GPS. There are a couple different ways you can counteract that. One is by placing targets on the ground. We call these ground control points, and these are essentially, a lot of times, they're white and black tiles that can be seen from the drone, and each tile has a location. You can use a high-grade GPS to get a location on those tiles, and during processing, you can assign photo pixels to those tiles, and it basically looks like a big spider web where you have 5 or 6 photos that can all see that one tile, and you're essentially snapping that data down to that survey point. That's one way, and that's a tried and true method. We've been doing that method with drones for years, but we're starting to see hardware, software solutions to this, like RTK or PPK enabled drones. So RTK, or real-time kinematic, using essentially the internet or other wireless stream to correct the innately inaccurate GPS in the drone to create very accurate photos that can essentially be dragged and dropped into processing to create very accurate data. PPK, or post-processing, essentially uses a GPS file to post-process the images after the flight is complete to enable them to be more accurate. When do you need accurate data? Well, this is a question for your specific use case. Like I said, if you just need an image from the sky, a map of the sky, you don't necessarily need that to be, sub-inch accurate. Maybe you don't need to go through the process of laying ground control points or purchasing an RTK enabled drone. However, if you're going to be doing any scientific experiments or flying multiple times over the same area, that's when you're going to want to ensure that your data is as accurate as possible and kind of overlays with other data sets or other models that you might have.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremiah. And so just in the last few minutes here, Jarlath, if you could go back in time and start your program all over again, are there some things that you would do differently, or perhaps as you're providing this advice to others that are just getting started, what are some of those considerations that you might provide for us today?
Yeah, thanks, Lane. And I think most of the stuff we did pretty well, and I'm not sure if that was by intelligence, intent, or just dumb luck. Certainly, we had some close calls. I remember doing flight planning once in an area with a lot of topographic relief and not setting up the automated flight plan to account for the terrain. So luckily, the drone sort of threaded the needle through some tree branches during a leaf-off season here in Vermont, so I would have paid more attention to those things. I think the stakeholder buy-in was really important. That was something that I felt we did well early on, and that was across the board with our legal team, our risk management, and on the educational side, and making sure that people can see this as bringing value to the institution. And then I think it's really a nice opportunity for us to step back, and drones bring back in many ways the early days of remote sensing, right? And if you go back and look at the old types of photo interpretation work that was done, how did people identify a white pine, for example? It wasn't done based on a spectral response. They really understood the structure and texture of that species. And I think it's a wonderful tool for bringing back tradecraft. And then it's, as I mentioned, it's a great way to illustrate the trade-offs between different sensors and different processing methods. For example, just looking at the differences between structure from motion from a drone, which can be very high resolution, and then comparing that to perhaps active sensing such as LiDAR. What a unique way to understand how our different sensors and how our different processing settings affect what we see on the landscape. Because it's not just about the methodology, so much is about the small decisions that you as the analyst make along the way in your flight plan, in your choice of the platform, in your processing algorithms, whatever it is that impact your analysis at the end.
I think that's very well said. And I want to thank everyone for their time attending today, and our panelists for their experience and sharing their best practices and tips and tricks. If you please would stay, we have a 5-minute break that we're going to start now for the next session. Thank you so much for your attendance. And thank you, Jarlath.
Thanks, Lane.
All right, so welcome back from the short break, everybody. We're going to proceed with our next working group, focusing on 3D imagery. So as in terms of the previous session, we saw so much lively discussion, so many wonderful questions that came in. So please, in the same spirit, do keep the questions coming. Very, very exciting. So the topic of this session, so we'll take a look at different options. When we think about, we have all these different sensors, all these different platforms for collecting remotely sensed data. And there's all these different capabilities in terms of how to create accurate representations of outdoor geographic areas, indoor geographic areas in terms of 3D. So we'll take a look again at some of these challenges and opportunities associated with 3D imagery. And in a very similar fashion to our previous session, we have a team of experts. So we'll have an expert from our academic community. So Tommy Jordan from University of Georgia is going to join us. And we'll have a couple of subject matter experts. Again, we'll have folks that are helping with the questions. So Caroline Pirate, Esri, and Lee Brenton from Esri are going to help with some of that discussion and the Q&As that are coming in. And Kira Morish is going to facilitate and to moderate this particular session. Kira is a solution engineer on our smart cities team. Her focus is 3D, and particularly the ArcGIS urban application that we have. And obviously, so with urban, there's a lot of focus that is being placed on cities in terms of creating sustainable cities, solving problems, and so on. So Kira, we'll let you take it over.
Great, thanks, Jerry. So for this working group, our topic is remote sensing, the foundation for 3D capture and reality mapping, which is exciting in terms of discussing approaches and challenges to integrating these subjects into the curriculum. and in terms of addressing rapidly developing technologies in areas like photogrammetry. And I'm joined today by three experts in the 3D and remote sensing fields, and I'll hand it over to the panel to introduce themselves, starting with Dr. Tommy Jordan.
Hey, everybody, I'm Tommy Jordan, and I'm from the University of Georgia, the Center for Geospatial Research. I'm also past president of the American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing. I've spent my career working in 3D, starting with the very first spot satellite stereo data, and working through, I'm a drone pilot now, and so I've gone through kind of all of the heartache and experimentation to get 3D from imagery onto our desktops.
And Tommy, I really enjoyed learning about your augmented reality program at the university. That was great.
Yeah, well, that's we've got a pretty good team of smart people working there, so it's with lots of good ideas. Yeah.
Okay, and Caroline.
Yep. Hi, Caroline Tyra. I am on Esri's imagery remote sensing team. Long experience in the geospatial community, working with everything from satellite data to drones, lots of different data types: radar, lidar, imagery, acoustic. Currently, I report into our Sure software team, which is newly acquired. It's 3D software that creates reconstruction from imagery photogrammetrically.
Caroline, you must have seen just a whole wave of change recently.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk about that too, because we really have moved. There's been a great convergence built on GIS with what was formerly very separate in terms of simulation from game engines to really getting into, bringing CAD and BIM data together. So it's been really fun.
Great. Thanks, Caroline. And Lee.
Hi, good day. My name is Lee Brinton. I'm the 3D technical and practice lead for professional services at Esri, and that's our consulting firm. So a lot of the work that I focus on is around 3D GIS. I have a background in remote sensing and also offshore maritime surveying.
Great, thanks, Lee. So to kick off our conversation today, we have a poll with a couple of questions. If we could launch the poll, and if you take a couple of minutes, maybe half a minute, just to take a look at these questions, we'd love to get your feedback. So the first question is centering around the value of 3D data. And then the second question, we're interested in finding out the sources of remote sensing data that you're commonly using at the moment in your courses or your research. And Caroline, based on what we were just talking about, we could probably add a whole bunch more to this list as well.
I particularly like the "it's cool" answer because it is. And I think anybody watching this understands that really the best thing about 3D, whether you understand the source imagery, is that it's immersive. It's the way we as humans view things. I like 2D stuff too, but 3D really is immersive, brings everything into context at a human level. So yeah, it is cool.
I love that. All right, maybe just a couple more seconds here, and then we'll take a look at the results. It's funny, Caroline, in the product that I work with, Urban, we're using the integrated mesh a lot more, which is we do it exactly for the reason you just described, because it starts to provide that really immersive experience.
Exactly, Kara. And when we talk about 3D, there's a couple of different disciplines here. And I mentioned gaming engines earlier. So procedural modeling, simulated 3D is robust, and we've got great solutions for that here at Esri. But this is the remote sensing and imagery community. So what we're really seeing is the application of reality capture and real-time data capture being applied over meshes or in point clouds or in true orthomosaics that really it captures the as-built environment and what everything, at least at a point in time, models.
Yeah, I like that. And it helps you see what you might not have noticed before, which is super helpful in the urban environment as well as the natural. Okay, let's have a look at our results here. So the first question, what is the value of having your data in 3D? We have an overwhelming response for better visualization. And then coming in second is better understanding for decision making. So Tommy, I might pass this question over to you to see if you have had a similar experience when you're introducing 3D in your courses and to students' communication and understanding of the content.
Was that a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's like, do you find that it does give them better understanding, better communication, better visualization?
Yeah, especially like when I'm teaching, for a long time I taught a geology field school, and by integrating LiDAR and drone point clouds derived from drones, being able to twist those things around and look at them from different angles really help to understand and communicate what these different geological structures are. We taught it out in Colorado, where the geology is absolutely in your face, and much more than Georgia here, where everything's buried, but under trees and dirt, soil, excuse me. But I mean, that using the 3D and the visualization applications to be able to move these things around and see it from different angles really does, and see the context, lines of sight and things like that. It really does improve your ability to communicate what's going on in the landscape. So I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And it's great for students as well, like just to have that understanding. It's good for, I know a lot of the city customers that we work with, that's enormously beneficial to them to be able to get that increased understanding.
And it's cool.
And it's also cool.
Yeah.
That was the third favorite answer. Okay, and then for what primary sources of remote sensing data, we have a lot of different responses here: LiDAR, drone, DEMs. Tommy, in your courses, do you have a sort of a similar range of data sets that you're using?
We've used all those data sets. I think that today, for the 3D, we're using, like it said that the LiDAR and DEMs were the primary sources. I find that I'm liking more and more higher resolution data these days. And so I'm working with smaller project areas and like higher resolution data. Well, I mean, Georgia, we work on the whole Georgia coast. That's not exactly a small project area, but with a DEM that has a 1 meter vertical resolution, or a LiDAR, which has got 6 inches vertical resolution, I would much rather use the higher resolution stuff. And then for smaller feature project areas, the drones give me, I mean, we map gardens, and so we're mapping actually plants and leaves and calculating biomass. And so the 1 millimeter resolution that we can get from a drone from 20 feet is pretty great, So don't use so much stereo satellite data anymore. It's don't really need to, but used to a lot with Spot and Iconos and some of those others.
Is that demand, Caroline, this question's for you, is that demand for the higher resolution? You see that throughout your recent work with the Shore?
Yeah, great question, Kara. We do because feature extraction is really important, and even down to street level. So if you can get a beautiful 2 centimeter mesh and resolve objects at very high resolution, there's a lot of applications for it in infrastructure, monitoring and management and design, in planning your electric grid, things like that. There's other applications where, okay, sometimes good is good enough and you don't need it as at that extreme level. But we're also finding again that imagery is playing a really important role in in both accuracy, precision in creating some of these 3D models.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, switching tack now. I'm interested in trying to find out a bit more information about when you're starting, this is to you, Tommy, when you're starting to teach students 3D, what are some of the most effective tools you have to introduce them to some of the concepts?
Probably I should start with LiDAR talking, because that's the most in your face and easy kind of a 3D data set. It's automatically three-dimensional. And we have good LiDAR over the county that I live in and over the campus. So if I can bring, I'll give them a subset of a LiDAR data set, a couple of tiles, and we'll look at it in a tool like Quick Terrain Reader, which is a free visualizing tool, and just let them scan around and fly through and create videos and whatnot. Show them what 3D does, and then we'll, show them how it's created, talk to them about LiDAR and how it's done, and then move from there into the photogrammetry and the point cloud derivation from drone imagery. And we'll actually take them out and collect some data or give them some canned data. Sometimes we let them collect data, from handheld photographs of like small things like cemetery monuments or statues or rocks or hillsides or something like that, and let them create their own 3D data from that.
Got it. Thanks, Tommy. And Lee, I know you do a lot of education as well and introduction to 3D. Do you have any specific tools or workflows that you use?
Yeah, mostly we focus our efforts around utilizing LiDAR. And most often I have been using, we find that the 3D base map solution, which is a free download for ArcGIS, is something that's really useful. It really starts to give our audience or the students a foundation around ArcGIS and what can we do in 3D. It utilizes LiDAR, and it's kind of framed around a tutorial-based program. It doesn't just get them familiar with visualizing in 3D, but it also allows them to get their hands on some analytics, things like feeding this into an urban planning workflow or doing some shadow impact, solar radiation. These are all hot topics for a lot of our students, and same with flood impact. So rather than it just being a cool image, it starts to become a usable representation for analysis. And the really nice thing about the 3D base map solution is that it's essentially a guided workflow that you can walk through. And I use this often for a lot of the courses that I teach to get people ramped up on 3D.
Could I ask a question to you, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not familiar with these 3D base maps. Does it give you an opportunity? It says foundational workflows, and so does it come with data, or does it allow you to?
Yeah, it actually comes with data. It comes with LiDAR, building footprints. It walks you through. It has documentation and everything. You can go from start to finish and have data published onto the web that's 3D, and then also your analytical results. So it's the full workflow.
And can you actually plug your own data into this once you understand how the workflow works?
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I work mostly on our consulting side of Esri's company, and we use this in-house as well to do data production for customers. So if you would like to do some data production for your university campus or the city that the university is in, you can get the access to the LiDAR and feed this directly into the tool sets. And what it's really doing is simplifying a lot of the traditional step-by-step analytics that one would need to go through to create content, like digital elevation models and extracting footprints and finding those footprints and things like that. And it's really simplifying it through some back-end Python scripts that we've prepared the user doesn't need to know Python. They just need to walk through the steps and go through each procedure.
So in an educational environment, I mean, would you, I mean, we need to know how to, we need to be able to teach the students how to do this, building extractions and the getting rid of the vegetation layers and being able to process all of the LiDAR. Would you start with something like this workflow and then work backwards and saying, okay, so now here is how you actually build the components of this thing?
100%. Yeah. So this will give a very basic foundation of how to do this work, and it gives the student some fundamental understanding of what is an elevation model, what's the difference between a digital surface model, a digital terrain model, and then how do I normalize those things, and what is a normalized digital surface model, and why would those things be useful to me? Once you have that basic understanding, the Python scripts are actually publicly available, and you can crack them open if you wanted to and start to dissect them. Or you could start to look at individual tools that the tasks are calling and look at them in more detail. So you can start to modify it a little bit.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Trying to get out of my...
Great. And that's a tool we use all the time as well to create the 3D context. Very handy. Okay, we have some questions coming in from the Q&A. So this first one, I'm just going to open it up to the panel, and feel free, whoever would like to jump in on this one. It's from George, and he's asking, can you give a brief rundown of any experience anyone has in the use of digital twins for asset management and planning?
That is a really broad topic, to say the least.
So, George, feel free to narrow it down if you like.
Right. Over to you, Caroline.
Not something I can do in the space we have here. We've got a lot of really great blog posts from both our 3D team with the City Engine GML. Shore is getting involved in that space as well. And we've got this crack AEC team who are also applying principles of digital twins every day. So there's a lot of material to point you to. I'd be happy to do that separately. But again, the science of where really means that GIS is the foundation for all of this good stuff. And so we're definitely in the space and doing a lot of work there.
To kind of extend what Caroline's describing, that is a really broad question. However, what I like to how I like to approach it is understanding if the target is to have what I consider a static representation, which some people consider as a digital twin or like a static diorama of an urban space, if that's the digital twin target. Or are you interested in tying smart devices to the three-dimensional representation? So have an IoT really tied in, and then understanding what is going to be tied in and how are those back-end systems going to interface with your 3D representation of that. We see this often with ports and cities and counties where maybe not all of the assets that they're working with are visible. So that's where 3D really starts to jump out as being useful. It gives you another avenue into visualizing content that on the street or the proverbial street that you wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye. Things that are underground, underwater, inside walls, things like that. But it becomes a really big task to think about.
Thank you both for helping with that question. Very good. Tommy, from what you've heard from Caroline and some of the new data sets available, and from Lee, is there a decision-making process that you have to go through before you start to think about adopting some of these new technologies in terms of teaching students and exposing them to more 3D visualization and analysis?
One of the problems in teaching 3D GIS is that, especially at an undergraduate level, it doesn't really happen. We're focused, there's not really room in the curriculum for more than just maybe a lecture. The focus is on 2D, learning the foundations and and how to, operate the software and all that. And so most of the 3D comes in as a graduate student seminar, master's and PhD levels, or as individual students are interested. So then it comes down to what are the problems that you want to solve, and every problem that you want to solve and the scale at which you need to solve it, kind of points you to a different kind of data, or what is the most appropriate thing to do. I mean, if you're trying to map gully erosion from a there's the words are being transcribed, and it says it's underneath there. It says you want to belly erosion, which is kind of funny, but but gully erosion, you've got different scales, gully erosion or landslides, which is what do you want to care about? And so you might use a drone, you might use handheld photography. You might use a drone at 400 feet, or you might use a drone at 50 feet. Or if you have LiDAR available, then you can do that. I mean, coastal erosion is a big deal for us, and also wetland stuff. And so the drone is going to be the only way you can really do that, because you can time your drone flight for low tide or any particular time of year, spring tides, or however it happens to be. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility to that. So the answer to your question is, it's complicated. It really depends on the problem that you want to solve. Somebody I saw in one of the questions, somebody had asked about INSAR, and radar is, from satellites, that's a really big area that you're dealing with. And I don't really do that anymore so much. Like I said, I'm more interested in the higher resolution solutions, but there again, the INSAR might be completely appropriate if you're dealing with an oil field in Canada or something like that, where you want the big picture for it.
I guess that comes back to the idea of teaching students how to not just the tools themselves, but what problem they're addressing, how to use the right tools to get the most appropriate answer or the most accurate answer.
And really, what are the characteristics of the different data sets? Because they all have different, we've talked about accuracies, we've talked about resolutions, we've talked about, weather conditions of the things. Oh, I don't know, we did talk about weather, but, you can't fly a drone in the rain, but you can get radar in the rain. So, or through the cloud, whatever, but just the different characteristics of the data and what they're really well suited for. And so that's all.
That makes perfect sense. Lee, I expect you find that as well in the consulting side.
Yeah, I like to really have a good understanding, and also try to get the end user to have a good understanding of what their goal is. I have a saying that usually the highest resolution data is not the best for all applications. It's good to understand what is the lowest level of detail needed to do the task at hand. If it's something about urban planning, I don't necessarily need to see every single window on all of the buildings throughout the cityscape. I just need to understand what are the buildings around and what are the general shapes. And that also comes with a large cost. So if you think about how much time and money and effort it goes into creating a hyper realistic representation of the real world, it can be a lot. And is it really necessary for the task at hand? If I want to just understand shadow or flooding, and how the flood will impact a specific city. So having a good understanding and a really realistic understanding of what your task is key.
Yeah,
totally agree with that, Lee. The cost is at higher resolution stuff gets more expensive, and do you really need to spend that much money on it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that much processing time.
Yeah, well, that's money too, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So Tommy, with your virtual augmented reality course, is there plans to expand that? What are your thoughts on the future here in the last couple of minutes that we have?
Well, I'm not really involved in that particular thing. Marguerite gives me credit for it, but we're integrating more and more into it. We've got we've got goggles, and people are creating. We have students who are creating apps which superimpose, the outside world with virtual imagery. We're actually working in some cases with historical imagery so that we can look at a location today, and then with our iPhones, we look up with our phone and we see, well, I can't see my phone, there it is, and you can see that an historical image as to what it looked like 100 years ago, and things like that. And so using that to understand cultural GIS or locations, and then is really an incredible way of being able to teach and learn. And then with the 3D goggles, it's fully immersive, and that's pretty it's pretty confusing to me anyway. So I haven't done it a lot.
You're supposed to say cool. That's the thing.
Oh yeah, it's very, very cool. It's really cool. No, it is that. You can say that without any equivocation at all.
All right. And Justin, we've got one more minute. Lee, we had a quick question in the chat window about that 3D base map solution is not just for the US, right? That's for...
Yeah, so the 3D base map solution is for anyone who has access to ArcGIS Pro. Anyone can use it. It could be used as long as you have LiDAR data. It also comes with LiDAR data, so if you don't, you can just go through the process of creating the data with the provided tutorial data. We do have base map content outside of the US, if that's something that you're interested in, but usually that is shared based on the end client's permission. So you'd have to look for that. Yeah.
Great, thanks Lee. And thanks Tommy and Caroline. And thanks everyone for attending. We're going to be having a 5-minute break now, and then we'll start back with the third working group.
All right, so welcome back everyone. We will proceed with our third working group, the focus of which is GeoAI, that is artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning in geospatial technology. And we'll define what that actually means. But similar to previous session, there's been so many developments in this particular area for recent years. And we'll take a look at what are some of the opportunities that are available, as well as some of the challenges that come along the way. So in a similar session or similar spirit to some of the previous sessions we have a team of experts here from the academic community, as well as some Esri folks, and Mansoor Rad is going to moderate this session for us. So Mansoor is a chief technologist at Esri, specializing in this particular field. He's also a fellow colleague at Johns Hopkins University. He's been teaching big data analytics there for, I don't know, many, many years now, and as well as started teaching a GeoAI class a couple of years ago. So Mansoor is going to moderate this session for us.
Thank you, Jerry. Welcome everybody to this, I think it's going to be very exciting for session. First, I'd like to, like everybody on the panel here, to present themselves. Dr. Madden, please.
Hi, my name is Marguerite Madden. I'm a professor in the Department of Geography and also the director of the Center for Geospatial Research. I was a past president of ASPRS and also technical commission president of ISPRS. And I teach classes in the Department of Geography on aerial imagery and graduate seminars, and we're venturing into machine learning and deep learning.
Awesome. One day I have to come and see you. I mean, I live here in Georgia too. So, and actually my son just got accepted at UGA, so go Bulldogs.
Great.
Awesome. Omar, are you, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Omar. I lead the AI cross-sector team, and I've been working with many customers on combining AI, machine learning, deep learning with imagery analytics and GIS. So happy to be with you today.
Awesome. Greg?
Yes, my name is Greg Bruner. I work for Esri's professional services team, where I help customers implement machine learning and GeoAI techniques. I also adjunct teach at St. Louis University, where I teach programming for GIS. And just this past semester, I've started figuring out how to integrate some of the machine learning and GeoAI into my coursework.
And David, please.
Hi, everyone. David Yu. I'm a data scientist on the GeoAI team here at Esri. That's the same team as Omar. And I focus mainly on deep learning and computer vision. And I'll be able to answer some of your questions today. So please, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A chat box.
Right. So let's get started. Actually, something very important that everybody's kind of confused a little bit about is the difference between AI and ML and deep learning, and how does that fuse with GeoAI and stuff like that. And with that, I'm going to let Omar take it and give us a nice, good deep dive description about that. Go ahead, Omar, please.
Awesome. Thanks, Mansoor. So yeah, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of what do we mean by GeoAI, which I'm sure you guys have heard the term before. So we look at it as the intersection of these two very interesting worlds. I mean, you guys obviously know GIS and geography. Now, the way we look at AI is the big pursuit of achieving human-level intelligence by machines. Obviously, it's a big pursuit, started in the 1950s. And definitely, we have not reached that yet on a general level, maybe on a more narrow level. Machine learning as a subfield of AI, that's about learning from data to derive rules and extract patterns instead of being explicitly programmed. And deep learning, which we're going to focus on a lot of time today, as a subfield of machine learning using deep neural networks. And it's becoming generally good at dealing with high-dimensional data, unstructured data like images, voice, and text. So with the intersection of these two worlds together, we start seeing what we call GeoAI, which is the field of applying data mining, machine learning, data science, deep learning, all of these topics together with geospatial analytics to solve different kind of problems. And there are three main patterns of problems that we see. But before that, one of the interesting things that we see is this kind of overlap, this kind of fusion of GeoAI helps GIS professionals tap into the power of machine learning to use in their analyses. And the same thing on the other side. AI experts, machine learning, data scientists tap into the power of spatial analytics for their workflows, which we can see in three main areas. I mean, there are a lot of areas, but three major patterns: object detection and feature extraction from different kinds of imagery, as we're going to see today, predicting geospatial events, ones that are highly impacted by spatial factors, and finally finding patterns and clusters of interest that are statistically significant from geospatial data. And these are some examples from the first branch of GeoAI, which is predictive spatial analytics. You can see problems like predicting road crashes affected by the road structure, or maybe in crimes and water main failures, optimizing patrol allocation, yield forecasts for agriculture, and so on. Obviously, the world of imagery is a big one here. I would say it's the biggest one so far in terms of like derived impact, in terms of like automation, bringing automation to the process of analyzing imagery, detecting features like damaged structures in houses, map production automation like building footprint detection, land cover, mapping with high resolution, crop field assessment, health assessment like palm trees, as you can see here, and the list goes on. A lot of examples. Anything that you can detect under 1 or 2 seconds, we can generally train AI to do it if we have good training data. And finally, pattern finding, which is about finding statistically significant clusters in vector data. So with that said, I'm going to pass it back to Mansoor so we can have a discussion about that very topic, GeoAI. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Omar. That was a great, good recap of the difference between AI, ML, and deep learning. And I think that was very important. People kind of mix them up, these terms in here. And I think it's good that you created a beautiful separation. And of course, how's that applied to GIS is awesome. So with that in mind, like we usually, like the other sessions, we're going to start up with a poll to actually go through these ideas here, and let's see what the audience look like. So the first question is, are you currently teaching GeoAI class, machine learning, or deep learning? And now, of course, you know the difference between, so it'll be interesting to see that. Second one is, are you implementing GeoAI concept in your teaching today with your, and more importantly, what level of students you are being engaged with? And third question is the application of GeoAI. Are you using it for feature extraction, prediction, classification, prescriptive analytics, and anything else? And of course,
very, very important scenario like what Omar's talked about here. We're seeing a lot of imagery, but a lot of people are using other forms. So we'd like to hear from you guys what is going on in here. So I'll give you a minute here to answer this. For me personally, like Jerry was saying, I wish I could. I've been teaching this for quite some time. I love to redo some of the classes because the technology is changing so much that I like to bring in some of the new things, like especially the deep learning, into the into my class. I'm hoping to do that again. And again, like for me at Johns Hopkins, we teach more of the kind of like the graduate and the people that are coming back to do their classes, which is kind of good. And us in professional services here, the team, Omar, me, Greg, and David, we work with all these feature extraction, prediction. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I wish we should have said other, we should have put another, we should have put category here, all, you know? And of course, like what Omar is saying, a lot of aerial imagery is happening for us, but LiDAR is making a big push from various domains. And we saw now how powerful ArcGIS fuses with all of that scenario in here. I think I'll give maybe another 10 seconds here. So let's see the results here in a little bit. We're gonna, let's close the poll. Let's look at the results. Awesome. Wow. I did not expect that, to be honest with you. Dr. Madden, what do you think of that first one here? A lot of them are saying no, which is a little bit, I don't want to say disappointing, but I was hoping that this would have been much more advanced right now. What do you think about that?
Oh, I guess I'm not surprised because I think there's a lot of interest, but not a lot of knowledge of how to do it.
I see.
I think faculty, our faculty are, we're trying to train ourselves up in order to be able to teach it. So right. Any kind of resources for that, we will really welcome them.
Excellent. Well, as you know, we have massive resources. Omar, we can post it, or we can post some on the chat, some of the resources. We love you guys to take out these resources, use them. And again, not very difficult. We can teach the teachers, us, and then we can go from there. When COVID is finished, I'll come down to campus and we'll do a Vulcan mind meld. How's that?
That'd be good.
It will be fun, huh? Of course. I'm very glad that undergraduate students are also as contributing to graduate student. For me, I think this is now showing that this has been kind of pushed down, and the advanced scenario is not the advanced stories that people have been talking about, that you need the graduate level to do it, is now going down to undergrad, which is awesome. Dr. Madden, what do you think about that one too?
Oh, definitely. That's what I meant by the interest in it. Graduate students want to use it in their research. Undergraduates are following all the papers they read, are discussing deep learning and machine learning. Right. We have been using machine learning algorithms for classification in our remote sensing classes for a while. So, random forest or support vector models, but I think it's just expanding into all different areas of interest now.
Right. Omar, what do you think of the features where they're using it? That's an interesting also category, isn't it? Yes?
Yep, absolutely. I think thanks to the power of convolutional neural networks and the fact that you don't really need to handcraft these features and it can automatically understand what are the features contributing to an object or something, it made it quite easier versus other machine learning techniques to extract features out of imagery, which I think is one of the main reasons behind the excitement and the impact, to be honest, after it. And I'm very excited about that, because finally we have a powerful capability, deep learning, becoming much easier and accessible and providing high impact. So I think it makes sense.
Right, great. And Greg, what do you think of the sources of the data that people are using here?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of use of aerial imagery, Landsat, elevation models, products derived from elevation models like slope and aspect and flow direction, those kind of things. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this variety of imagery data sources are being used for deep learning and GeoAI.
Right, excellent, excellent. So one of the exciting parts, like what you saw previously for us when in ArcGIS, at ESRI, the capabilities are now starting to become so ubiquitous. But also what people keep on forgetting, which is something very important, is the downloaded models, right? Omar, can you talk about our downloaded model more, please?
Absolutely. So we've seen that sometimes a lot of the challenge in the process that people face when doing these workflows is training the model and finding the good training data. That's why we thought about, like, why don't we start like building these models, like training them and making them available for free on Living Atlas. So if you go to Living Atlas right now and search for DLPK, you're going to find a lot of these models for building footprints, land cover, road segments, you name it. And what I really like about this is that it's plug and play, right? You can download it, just run it in your notebook or ArcGIS Pro, and you always have the room to optimize using your local data if you find the model performance not that great. So I think not just for Esri, to be honest, like generally for the whole market, the more we have these pre-trained models, the more we're going to see higher adoption rates. Because I think training and finding good data is like the main bottlenecks, and this is hopefully solving them.
Great. I want to jump into something also that Dr. Madden has brought in, which is the challenges. Beside the teachers beside us not teaching the teachers right now, I think another challenge is kind of hardware also related, but the cloud is kind of solving this. When you want to go into these domains of geo AI and stuff like that, we rely so heavily on GPU to do a lot of that information, and not everybody has access to this GPU. Thank God for the like the Azure or the AWS or GCPs, they're making them accessible very easily. Dr. Madden, in your school, or what is that? What is the accessibility for people to have these what I call higher level compute than the traditional? Oh, I have a PC or stuff like that. Again, a lot of customers, not a lot of the students, you know, they have their Mac or their Windows machine. They don't have like the high-end GPUs to do these number crunching. So what is the challenges that schools like UGA are doing to help out students to bridge that gap?
Well, we certainly start out with subsets, you know, and Tommy talked about that in his segment. So manageable data sets to begin with, but then when graduate students are using it in their research, they definitely bump up against the limitations. So then, and I can also defer to my colleagues, and Dr. Sergio Bernardez has done a lot of this. He'll do parallel computing, rig up the multiple computers in our labs to be doing that. We do have a high performance computer that students and faculty have access to, but then they would need to have their own code. You know, they can't run ArcGIS or ArcGIS Pro or any on that. So then you're bringing data out, running it, and bringing it back in. So that's a workaround right now, but right. That is working.
Well, ArcGIS Pro right now, the latest one, by the way, you do not need to get out and come back in again. If you instantiate it like on a Azure or an AWS instance that has a GPU, the nice thing about it is if you have enough memory and you have enough disk, now you can process a lot of data in ArcGIS Pro. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, people, you can use the tools, which is push button and get up and running very quickly. But from our experience, we're finding that people want to drop down a little bit more to the Python notebook and stuff like that. Greg, can you talk a little bit about the notebook experience that what you've been doing with your scenario and stuff like that, please?
Yeah. So I fundamentally think that if you're going to get involved in deep learning and GeoAI, you really need to commit to learning a little bit of Python. And really, with imagery being foundational to GeoAI and machine learning, you're going to have to become familiar with working with arrays in Python and those kind of things, which can be challenging, to be honest. But in terms of accessing GPUs, one of the things that I've adjusted in my course is that I use a lot of ArcGIS notebooks. And so at least if I want students to go through some of these GPU-enabled models or GPU-enabled examples, they can use the ArcGIS notebooks with the GPU enabled capability and go through those. So, that's actually a big change I've made in my course, is trying to push materials, lectures, and lessons and stuff into notebooks so that they have this powerful capability at their hands.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, this is something that one of my requirements for my 2 classes that I'm doing is the GUI and the big data class is they need to know Python programming. It's a fact, unfortunately, right now, when they're going to start students, they want to start doing these advanced analytics. They need to go down to scripting the original. I mean, you can still do it with the tools, but it's very, the push button tools, I find them constructive on my side, and I find some of the students, they find them when they drop down to notebook experience, which is the new thing, right? They love it. Yes, there's the classic way of model builder, but we're finding from our experiences that people going to the notebook are loving it more and stuff like that. By the way, to the person, to Dave, Mr. Johnson, that answer, is there documentation or the guidance on explaining the process of retraining the models on how to do that? I would like to refer to the chat room, please. There's a lot of example. Omar, can you talk a little bit about that, please, the retraining process, if you don't mind, please? And again, the samples here that we talked about is very important. Go ahead, Omar, please.
Absolutely. So, I mean, making models portable is something interesting, right? It's sometimes it's challenging. So how can you make a model work on different kind of sensors, different kind of resolutions, imagery, and stuff like that? So usually the kind of pattern that we see is that you have a good model that you try to make it as general as possible, make it generalizable. But then when you apply it in the real world, sometimes the accuracy isn't that great. So the thing here is that there are some techniques like transfer learning that would help optimize the model and make it achieve higher accuracy if you transfer the learning, right, somehow so that you optimize with your local data. So you can do this easily if you use any pre-trained model today in ArcGIS Pro, for example, and choose to retrain using your own local data. And as Mansour mentioned, it's a button click. You don't need to write any code, and you can do the same thing from the Python API. And I think that's going to be the case for some time. That's why we're seeing these terms like ML ops or machine learning ops, where you end up with different models that have been trained on different kind of data sets with different accuracies. And you need to keep track of this, right? Having some sort of model gallery and always have the ability to like combine some models together, get some models, apply transfer learning, retrain with your data. Because you always are going to have like changing requirements, changing imagery. So this concept of like retraining I think is important, especially for production related scenarios.
And Omar, I think part of that question was also asking, are there any best practices, recommendations that you can give on perhaps retraining over different resolutions of imagery?
Sure. I mean, we get this question a lot, which is like, is that model good for this kind of resolution or not? Now, the thing is, there is no golden rule here, right? I always like to start with what I have. Let's say I want to do a land cover mapping, and the model has been trained on 1 meter resolution imagery, but now I have a 30 centimeter resolution and I want to run it. I'm not going to start from scratch. I'm going to try this model first and validate it against some testing data and see what kind of accuracy do I have. Trying to make the validation on diversified data sets as possible. So choosing different areas, different geographies and stuff like that, and benchmarking against the validation data. Now, if the accuracy isn't that great, I start tracking which parts or geographies have less accuracy, which classes. Sometimes we find that building footprints, for example, have less accuracy in some areas. So we go back and label more data from that area and retrain the model and reapply it. And I think Mansour has a lot of experience doing that with our customers. Mansour, do you want to chime in on that?
Data labeling. As you know, we're not data scientists. I call ourselves data janitors. Why? Because guess what? We spend a lot of our time data cleansing, right? So we've been promoted from scientists to janitorials, right? Why? But actually, it's a lot of hard work, as Omar is saying, right, to prepare that label data and we go to it. And something else that I want to mention here, again, from our experience, for example, though the pre-trained model are working very well, these were kind of a little bit like, for example, I'll give you the example of the road detection. These work very, very well in the United States. But for example, when we took it to imply it in Kuwait, when actually at the developer summit, one of our customers the Public Authority for Civil Information in Kuwait, took that model. Well, in the beginning, it did not work too well. And we tracked the metrics and like what Omar is saying. Well, we took that model, right? And we complemented with additional local data, and suddenly we shot off to up to the 93-95% accuracy, which was awesome in here. I'd like to go back to the ArcPy story here. Yes, Angela, you asked about, is it the ArcPy module? It is the ArcPy module. You can still use the ArcPy module, the good old geoprocessing task that you're familiar with, right? And now with the learn model, right? The one that Greg talks about and stuff like that, you go into it. So now you're combining both scenarios in there, and you're bringing additional model like scikit-learn and stuff like Dr. Madden, you guys, is there like a class, like a programming in Python in the beginning that UGA has that somebody is a requirement for some of this? Or can you tell us a little bit of the prerequisites, especially in programming for them to go into that new level, please?
We do have a programming and GIS class, but we also am sitting in on a class taught right now on machine learning, and so that the introduction is learning Python, and all the exercises are implemented in Python. The other thing we're doing is I'm pairing one of my graduate students with a graduate student in statistics, and he's co-advised by myself and the statistics faculty member. So that's been a really nice partnership, and the statistics student will get the training samples from my student, and then run some processes, and then bring them back to see where they're not, where they're accurate, where they're not. So that's been a nice partnership, I think.
Yes, people have a tendency of forgetting the basics, right? The linear algebra, the statistics, and I think it's important to go back to them, which is, those fundamentals that we were taught in high school, right, are very important. That's why I keep yelling at my son, learn the fundamentals. He's like, I'll never use it again. Well, you know what? Look at you, oldie dad. He's using it all over again now, right? The things that I learned in high school, now in my professional life, I'm using it, and pairing the two together is awesome. I'd like to talk about one more thing. I hope we answered for Alex the retraining of the model. Just to let you know, Alex, there is an option when you load in a model in ArcGIS Pro to do the additional training to actually point to a DLPK that Omar is talking about. You basically start from that model and now go on from there. That is how you do it. Is a little checkbox to basically unfreeze the model and load the pre-existing model to go on from there. Okay, Greg, I don't know if you've had experience with that.
I actually haven't. I haven't used that too much. I'm more like a data janitor in that, what you're saying. I have notebooks that are huge that go and join data to join attributes to data, and then I have a notebook that runs like 5 lines of code and runs the model. So I feel like I'm more in that data janitor.
Yes. Well, the new term for this session here, data janitorial, right? So let's add that as a class, maybe to the John. I'll talk to Jerry about adding it to the John Hopkins repertoire of classes in here. There's a question by Felice. Can GeoAI be used with blockchain analytics? It'll be very interesting. Blockchain, as you know, the blockchain is an immutable database that is distributed. That is the key about it here. And again, immutable action. Can GeoAI be used with that? Sure, if you're using that blockchain as an input to GeoAI, where you know that the data has not been changed. So it's an interesting story. Again, the question is, can we integrate, again, a little bit deviation here, can we integrate blockchain with ArcGIS packages? Guess what? If you find the Python module, bring it in. You can do it the same thing as like scikit-learn and all these other things in there, which is pretty good in here. So there are somebody, but a concept. Can you point to online resources again, please, Alex? Look at the chat room. there is a lot of references that Omar put in there of demos, tutorials, live examples. So please look at there. You will find some very, very good stuff in there.
And Mansour, I'd just like to add from the comment from Ann Johnson, that's the geotechcenter.org is an excellent online repository for a lot of information. So she's pointing people to that.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We're almost here at the top of the of our session. Any parting words, Dr. Maiden, or anybody else, please?
Well, I'm excited and I'm learning, so maybe next year I can give you an update.
I'll look forward. Actually, as I said, you have a standing offer from me to come to campus here and work together. Parting words, Greg, Omar, David.
Sure. So I'm excited to see more undergraduates starting to get interested in starting to learn this stuff, because over the 5 years or so that I've been teaching, I feel like I've noticed that them taking on more programming courses and just being more prepared to learn this as an undergraduate. So I'm excited to see this pushed into the undergraduate curriculum.
Excellent. Omar, parting words?
I mean, same thing. I would definitely encourage everyone to start doing this today. I mean, there is no reason, to be honest. I mean, it's becoming very easy, very accessible. I mean, we have literally more than 50 notebooks, and I've shared all those links here. So it hasn't been easier, and you guys have access to all the needed software. So yeah, reach out if you have any questions. We would love to help. We would love to see you guys adopting this technology, because honestly, it's fascinating.
Right. When it comes down to Moses here, he asked a question. He's an urban designer and he works with the drone, and he's looking for models to help him with the subtraction model for the accumulation and all these correction. I'm not aware of any products. Again, you have to talk to the drone team about that. But could we as the GeoAI team with them to come up with a model that will help with the correction? It'll be a very interesting story to tell. And guess what? It's all about data labeling, right? So if we have the models that we taught it how to do corrections, remember, it correlates, but it doesn't mean causation, which is very interesting, right? So again, in neural network and deep learning, it correlates based on the data that you give it, but this is where the human stays in the loop. You have to do the causation, and thank God for that, right? So a lot of people are working on making that black box translate into quote unquote English, so like that you see what's going on, but we'll be going from there, okay? So with that, I am going to give it back to Jerry. I want to thank the panel here, Dr. Madden, Omar, Greg, and David. Though you were in the background, you were instrumental in everything here, watching everybody. Appreciate it. Jerry, back to you.
All right. Wonderful. And thank you, Mansour. And just thank you to all the panelists for answering all the questions. And also to all of you guys in the attendee list there for answering or asking the wonderful questions. So at this point, we're going to proceed with our closing session for today. Dr. Joseph Kursky is going to lead us through it. And the one thing that is different about the session is there's going to be chat that is open to all of you, to all the attendees. So you're going to be able to just freely chat, not just through the Q&A. So do let us know any reflections from today, anything outstanding. And Joseph will lead us through a number of different activities, a number of different fun things. But again, there's a chat, so you're welcome to chat away. And also Joseph Kursky, he probably doesn't need an introduction. But a lot of people know Joseph. He's one of the most passionate and exciting educators that we have. So he's an education manager on the education team at Esri, as well as he teaches at the University of Denver, along with a few other institutions that he's been part of. And Joseph, I'll let you take us through this closing session.
Okay, well, greetings all. Joseph Kursky here. Thanks, Jerry. This session is designed to be, how many sessions have you been to in the last year where one of the goals is to actually have fun and network? Maybe a few of them, maybe zero, but that's one of our goals for this session. And as people are arriving in the closing session here, I want us to think spatially. So testing your knowledge of a set of imagery about our physical and human-built world we thought would be a fun way to get us started. So it's a Name That Place quiz. And as Jerry mentioned, we've got a chat box, and you're welcome to put in. We thought we'd over-engineer it and maybe put a poll, but no, let's just keep it informal. Let's keep it in the chat box. And I'm going to ask you about 3 images. And I also want you to put your instructional hat on to think about how you might encourage students to get excited about imagery and remote sensing. We've had a lot of sharing about that today. But in this case, it is a very simple multiple choice quiz about our Earth. Okay, you ready to get started? All right. Now, this one, Victoria Falls, Angel Falls, or Niagara Falls. Now, you're thinking spatially about the imagery that you're seeing right here. You're thinking about the direction, and north is at the top. For some of you that you were paying attention earlier, you were thinking, there might have been a clue. One of our colleagues actually dropped the clue earlier on in the session, and I'm not going to give it away, but I'm going to have you think about the vegetation, the land use. What do I know about all 3 of those waterfalls? I'm going to scan the chat here. You folks are thinking spatially. We'll go through the answers here in a bit, but okay. So now let's think about mountains. Let's think about Aconcagua, Arenal, or Kilimanjaro. And as we do that, let's do this. What gives it away and what stays the same? This is a presentation in ArcGIS Online, so I can skip to any of the clues that I have loaded in here. And you can do the same thing, of course, with your tools that you've got at your fingertips. So let's think about this. Arenal, Aconcagua, or Kilimanjaro. Now you're thinking about, gosh, what do I know about all 3 of those? So it's kind of like what Mansour was talking about a moment ago with some of the fundamentals that he learned years ago. What do I know about places? What do I know about the land use, the land cover? You folks are good. You folks are good. Okay, I'm not going to give it away though, but I'm seeing some interesting answers come in over there on the chat box. Let's talk about urban rivers here for a moment. Let's think about London, Paris, or Hamburg in this particular set of images. And again, urban rivers. So I'm going to look at the land cover. I'm going to look at the street pattern. I'm going to look at the direction of rivers that I know are flowing through certain cities and so on and so forth. And so, okay, London, Paris, or Hamburg there. I'm seeing some notes in the chat box. Let me check and see how fast the tiles are streaming in. Oh, interesting. All right. Let's zoom in. This probably will give it away, right? If I zoom in a bit, I'm going to see. Let's do this. Let's zoom out a bit and see if that's going to give it away on any one of these. Let's zoom out a bit on, how about the volcano? If we zoom out on that, it's scale matters, right, folks? Scale matters, and scale is going to help us. As we do that, though, what I wanted to also say is, as that's streaming in, that as Jerry mentioned, I am very pleased to be a part of this community. I've had a career that's mostly spanned 4 different sectors of society: federal, so USGS, Census Bureau. Hey, the census counts just came out. NOAA. I also, like many of you, teach at different universities, and I also teach at community colleges. I love the community college network. It was just mentioned about the Geotech Center, for example, and I've also had toes in the nonprofit waters, and very pleased to be with my colleagues here on the Esri education team. Here are our 4 goals for this session. We've already touched on one of the goals through this quiz, to think spatially, but also sharing ideas and tools for remote sensing instruction in interesting ways. Number 2, to reflect upon what we learned and what we thought about today. And number 3, to network with each other. And number 4, I already mentioned this, but to have fun doing so. So I'm going to share in the chat box the link to this whole story map so you can access the quiz and you can use the quiz and so on. So I'm going to go over to the chat box here and share that with everyone. There is the story map. All right, let's do the following. let's go to the answers. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to look at the answer key, which is right here. So yes, congratulations. This is Victoria Falls. The Zambezi River flows from north to south in this image into the gorge, forming the boundary between Zambia on the east and Zimbabwe to the west. Very good. And it is Arenal. I had the pleasure of taking some educators there 2 times. And the tropical vegetation, the tropical cloud formations, and the nearby lake are the major clues. It's a young volcano, and its activity prohibits vegetation from taking root along its sides. And then that last one, I know we had a little streaming problem, sorry about that, but it is Paris, and I salute all of you for, even if you didn't get it right, you're still thinking spatially, right? That's what we want to get across to our students, thinking about patterns, relationships, and trends. Okay. So again, I use the presentation mode in ArcGIS Online to create this quiz. It's very simple. It's even simpler than a story map. It's basically slides with base maps and text, but a very effective way of getting people excited about remote sensing or geospatial technology or a lot of other subjects. Another thing that I wanted to mention here ever so briefly is that I know my colleagues mentioned this, but please consider us as your industry partner. My team and others here at Esri are here to support, encourage, and really stand alongside you over the long term. The education program has existed since 1992, so it wasn't just invented yesterday. But we want to help you be successful with geotechnologies instruction, research, and on the administrative side. We can't do this alone, right, folks? There's too many problems to solve. We need to be working together to solve these 21st century problems that are all around us. And we treasure you as a valued part of the remote sensing GIS community. We truly do. You're making a positive difference in people's lives. You're empowering the change agents of the future. Okay. I feel very confident, folks, that we will be able to solve these very serious 21st century problems that we're facing. We have good data, as we talked about today, good tools, good methods, expertise. But just on a personal note, what gives me the most hope is all of you, your expertise, your energy, your passion. And I think it's more important than ever in our fast-paced societal and technological environment to help people reflect on their own learning. This is not as common in education as I would like it to be, but I submit that we must make it so. To that goal, I've used this book that you see here in the screen, Stephen Brookfield's book, in numerous courses, workshops, and presentations over the last 15 years to help people reflect upon their learning. And what I like about these questions, and again, I encourage you to maybe take a look at this, it's a critical incident questionnaire, is how Brookfield lays it out. It's that the questions are short, they're to the point, and they help the attendees or class participants focus on one thing for each of a set of categories. So I thought we would spend just a few minutes, again, using the chat box to think about day 1 of the Imagery Summit. Note that with the number of attendees, my Esri colleagues and I will not be able to highlight every comment or even read every comment, but it's mainly designed for you to self-reflect upon your own learning today. So let's talk about this first one. At what moment in the conference today did you feel most engaged with what was happening? Most engaged? Feel free to use that chat box, folks. I'll share one of my own as you're thinking about it. I felt most engaged when, as someone and my teammates and I can identify, who works with all levels of education. So I work with our K through 12 primary and secondary team and our university team. I was very engaged when Connor Cahalane, I think I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly, spoke about working with primary and secondary schools. I loved that. Okay, yeah, thanks. The UAS, the deep learning models, the living atlas of the world. Yeah, thanks, folks. Thanks for chiming in there. What about this? What action did anyone, presenter or participant, take in the conference today did you find most helpful? Did you find most helpful? Think about that for a moment, if you would. I'm going to share one of my own. Thank you, folks. Dr. Jarlath's comment about the small decisions made along the way really impact your analysis and your results. I really liked that. It really resonated with me. Okay. Yeah, sharing the curriculum. Notebooks, summer training. Yeah, the lightning talks. Reducing buttonology. Yeah, that was mentioned several times, wasn't it? We'll talk more about that tomorrow. What about this? Was there anything today that was puzzling or confusing? Was there one thing that was puzzling or confusing? Okay, you don't always need high-res imagery. More is not always better. I'll share one. This is a funny note. The closed captioning said classic jazz analysis, JAZZ, while my colleague was showing the 3D mesh of Frankfurt. I thought that was kind of puzzling, the classic jazz analysis. Okay. Yeah, there's some good things that people are really being thoughtful about. Much appreciated, folks. Okay, appreciate those comments. Keep thinking about those. What surprised you the most today? I'll share one, if you don't mind. In the last session, I thought the data janitors phrase was rather intriguing, something I'm going to need to chew on. Certainly, the whole notion of processing the data for days, weeks, as we did in the not too distant past before we could actually do analysis, are gone. However, there's still dealing with data, and data is messy, right? Data will always be messy. We're trying to model the real world with these geotechnology tools. Yep. Okay. Thanks for sharing, folks. Last thing here. What was one thing about the conference or the summit today that you would like to learn more about? I know that's a big question, isn't it, Jerry? We could spend days. We're all lifelong learners. We want to learn more, but what's one thing? Okay, a lot of seeing the GeoAI, drones, notebooks. I'm right with you on those things. All right, folks. I'm going to now, because there were some people in the poll at the beginning that were beginning with all of this, that self-reported that they were beginning, I'd like to just highlight in about maybe 45 seconds each some of the tools that I've used and perhaps some of you have used in the past that are very engaging and get students really interested in discussing the whys of where and change over space and time. My current favorite is probably the Wayback Imagery. The Wayback Imagery. Some of you know that the Living Atlas has a set of apps, and these apps they can be used in several ways. In this particular case, they can this one can be used as just looking at imagery and changing the dates on the left, or on the left side here, and I'm going to put this in the chat box. On the left side here, you've got a swipe capability that came in around 6 months ago. And this was one of those things where when it came in, it gave me the geo tingles, if you know what I mean. It was really exciting. Because now with this swipe tool, of course, you can look at change over space and time in all areas around the planet going back to around 2014. So you've got high resolution imagery at your fingertips for studying urbanization. Or let's talk about another issue, water. What's wrong with this picture? It looks like the main surface water supplying Las Vegas and other communities is decreasing in elevation. I always think about what's where, why is it there, and why should we care? Remember that? What's where, why is it there, and why should we care? Why should we care about urbanization in an arid area like Las Vegas? Why should we care about surface and groundwater and other SDG goals? So this tool is a great way of looking at space over time changes. You can look at glacial retreat, agricultural expansion on the Great Plains of the USA or Saudi Arabia, the construction of the Three Gorges Dam, deforestation, reforestation, coastal erosion in England and elsewhere. Lots of key issues of our time with this one tool. But I know you folks are who I consider to be the the world's leaders in imagery and remote sensing education. So you want to dig deeper, don't you? In the upper left, above the swipe tool, is something I love, and that is the capability of bringing these images then into your own saved map in ArcGIS Online, which of course you could then also bring into ArcGIS Pro. Why would you want to do that? This is a fine tool as it is. But if you want to dig deeper, that's what I love about this. You've got a level 1 capability, and then you've got a level 2 capability. If you were to sign into ArcGIS Online and go ahead and save these images of the dates that you want and the places around the world that you'd like. So I love this tool. This is one of my all-time favorite tools and data sets. Another one that I like a lot is the Living Atlas Water Balance app. Now this is one of those tools where, once again, you've got an illustration for some of the things that we talked about today, namely the ability at our fingertips to get these Internet of Things feeds. So let's say I'm teaching about precipitation, for example. I go to Brazil and I see that, oh, I've got a not real time, but a few months old data feed coming in from a variety of stations. Now I'm all keen on, and as I know you are as well, about asking students to understand where the data came from, who created it, why it was created, how it was created, how often it's updated, and so on. So not just accepting it because it's on the web and not just accepting it because it's a map, but here we've got, wow, I can see that it's a summer. It's not a summer and winter. It's a wet season and a dry season, right? Wet season being, it looks like February, March, dry season being September, October-ish. Now I go to southern Libya. I should see whole months, and I do, with no precipitation at all. And I've got about 6 variables on the left side that I can analyze. And again, you've got a level 1 capability here, and then you've got a level 2 capability of you can download this as a CSV and then do further analysis in, for example, ArcGIS Pro. You can use the R bridge and bring it into R, all kinds of interesting things that you can do. Again, tapping into some of the things that we've talked about today, real-time or near real-time data from the Internet of Things with in this case, water as a key issue. All right, that's a couple of my favorite apps. I'll just mention a couple more. I don't have time to show all of these, but the Landsat Lens, kind of like the Wayback Imagery, gives you tiles of Landsat imagery. And so since it's Landsat, you go back to the 1970s. And you can, again, look at the expansion of urban areas in the UAE and so much else around the world. Fascinating, the Landsat Lens. Okay, and then I'm going to close that section off right now. But I wanted to mention a couple of things. I think many of you are aware that story maps you can use them in 2 main ways. You can have your students create them and summarize their research and present to you or their peers or a wider community. You can also use those as assessment tools. You're ticking off boxes in a rubric, for example, but you can also use them as instructional tools. And so there's a couple that I have included in here just as an example of engaging content-rich story maps to teach about key topics along with imagery. Yep, thanks. Thanks for the chat, folks. Yeah, I use story maps a lot when I'm presenting. I also use them as instructional tools. I still use Prezi and Microsoft Sway and PowerPoint, sure. But story maps oftentimes are the best tool to use, especially, of course, if you are wanting the students to engage in interactive spatiotemporal analysis. This tropical cyclones one is one of my favorites. Here's another one that I wanted to lay before you. You probably know the answer to this question. What is the most popular web mapping app of all time? I'm not going to click on it because you probably know. Unfortunately, for sad reasons, it's the JHU coronavirus dashboard. And my colleague Jerry teaches at JHU. The point is, there's a reason why that's so popular, right? People wanted to, and people still need to know, what is their decision going to be on their travel, their daily behavior, etc. One of the powerful things I think about the whole platform notion here, folks, is that you can connect pieces of this. We've had some discussion today about connecting pieces of the platform. And what I wanted to show here is this is just a very simple example, but in this case, I encourage the students to think about, what are you passionate about? Okay, what is it? In my case, one of the things that really motivates me is walkable neighborhoods. So when I'm on, work travel, hopefully someday again, I'll be able to do this again. But walkability. So in this story map, I have what is walkability. I have a survey 123, which many of you use, that asks people 5 simple questions. Is this neighborhood walkable? Rate it, tick all the choices that describe it. Where is it? And then submit a photograph. And then in my story map, of course, I have, as you probably would expect, the places around the world where people have submitted answers to that particular question. And then the one of the primary reasons why I wanted to show you this is because this dashboard that is also part of the story map, it is the same tools, of course, that JHU and others use to create dashboards. It's the ArcGIS dashboard tool, web mapping application. I just have a couple of simple pie charts in here, recording the result of the 400-ish surveys that have come in thus far in my 475 in my walkability survey. And the reason why I mention this is twofold. One, it's connecting 4 pieces of the platform together. And I think the connection in the platform that is WebGIS is very powerful as an instructional tool. The second thing is that the dashboard, the story map, the survey, and the map in ArcGIS Online took me 1 afternoon. So building out what my colleagues have said, we're not talking, weeks, months to create some of these things. To be sure, there are some complicated workflows in geospatial technology, right, folks? We all know about. But I think having these kinds of examples and having your students then, run with this idea about an issue that they care about is one of those things that you could introduce, for example, at the beginning of a semester for some pretty powerful results. All right, let's get into, let's do a geo joke. Why not? Why not? Person 1, I'm a big country fan. Person 2, China's very large. Ooh. Okay, that was a geo joke. Maybe a very tiny geo joke, but it was a geo joke. One of the things that Jack Dangermond and others talk about repeatedly is this whole notion of GIS as a nervous system for the planet that brings people together. Some of you may recall the GITA video, A World in a Box, from some years back. And it had the spotted owl environmental community together with the logging timber industry at the beginning of the video. It was a very compelling video, people throwing themselves in front of logging trucks and so on. And what I would love about showing that to students was that about 20 minutes into the video, people were at least not coming to blows anymore. They were at least gathered around a table with maps produced from GIS because they all realized they had a common goal, a healthy forest. I bring that up because GIS maps are one way of bringing people together around problems that we're all facing. Another way of bringing people together is through music. Yes, indeed. We're going to have a geo song break, and we're going to have it right now. Now, I know many of you are going to say at the end of this, Joseph, you need to keep your day job. Don't become a professional musician. I'm going to the field, baby, don't you want to go? I'm going to the field, baby, don't you want to go? I'm going to collect some data in citizen science mode. Now, verse 2, I'm going to where the Wi-Fi's far behind. I'm going to where the Wi-Fi's far behind. But that's okay, because we can collect data offline. That was a geo song for you all. Let's do one more. I look at my maps and I see they need tending while my device gently beeps. While my device gently beeps. That was a geo song, a couple of geo songs for you. Okay, I've got more if you truly want to punish yourself on my Our Earth video channel. I've got 5,000 videos on there, folks, about space, place, geotechnologies. Feel free to check that out. What are your favorite books about the Earth? I know we could have a nice chat about this. A couple ones that I want to feature here. And thanks for the chats coming in. I really like a couple of books that I read last year. In the Eye of the Hurricane. So this talks about that geography mattered back in 1781 when the French sent their fleet up to Yorktown in Virginia. Partly it was because there were several devastating hurricanes in the Caribbean,
And that was one of the reasons why the French sent their fleet up to Virginia, which of course helped the American cause way back when. So geography matters. I love the message of that. And then there's an author in England, Monisha Rajesh, that wrote Around the World in 80 Trains. It's a very nice book about her reflections along those trains. She even went to North Korea. So really fascinating. And then Alex Trebek was a great friend to geography. As many of you know, he ran the geography bee for years in Washington, D.C., and I read his autobiography, which was very touching. My favorite geography-related books of all time, and I'd love to hear what you, oh, thanks. Yep, what you folks are chatting about. The Mapmaker's Wife is about the French surveying team that went down to Ecuador in the 1730s to figure out if the Earth was an oblate spheroid or a prolate spheroid. Really fascinating. And they were so keen on getting it right. You know, there were snakes and the natives were hostile to them, understandably. What are you doing in our country, etc. But they had to get the measurements right. And then, of course, Longitude by Dava Sobel. I think many of you have read Longitude. All books from Eric Larson, Isaac Storm about the 1900 hurricane, Dead Wake about the Lusitania. They're very laden with history and geography, and also he goes to the primary sources, and it's just wonderful. Any book by Simon Winchester. The Map That Changed the World is about the world's first geologic map from England and Wales in 1805, 1810-ish. And the newest one is called Land. It just came out in January, so 2021 publication date on that one. A couple years ago, Andrea Wolf was at the Esri user conference, and she wrote The Invention of Nature, and I got to shake her hand. It was a great moment. But it's about von Humboldt, and what a scientist. Any books by David McCullough, historian? I'm rather fond of my own as well, Interpreting Our World, 100 Revolutionary Moments in Geography. What are your favorite GIS and remote sensing books? We could have a further discussion. In fact, my colleagues will talk about some resources from Esri Press and elsewhere tomorrow. But a few of my favorites, Price's book, Shalito's book, Kenneth Field's book on cartography, and Andy Mitchell, the Esri Guide to GIS Analysis. It's a little bit old, but it's got, you know, as Mansour was talking about, fundamentals to analysis. So those are some of my favorites. The Map Makers by John Noble. Yeah, Wilford. Thanks, folks. Yeah, I'm right with you. How to Lie with Maps. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a core essential reading for a lot of undergraduates or even graduate students. Okay, let's talk about this for just a moment. Your favorite phone apps, you want to share those that maybe are geo-related. I use Survey123 a lot. I use Mapillary a lot as well. So it's a way of creating your own trail view or street view, like Google Street View, but with your own set of tools. And I love that. That's a business partner of ours. I just wrote this up last week about, some people mentioned augmented reality with Fieldwork, GIS, and IRSES Solutions, which is a business partner of ours. But this is what you can see when you're out in the field with this. You can see things that you've loaded from REST endpoints like traffic accidents, signs, storm drains. And you can also look at your own data. Let me scroll down to where I'm looking. Here's my own data. So I've collected trees, shrubs, fence posts, etc. on a campus. So that's another intriguing new augmented reality tool. The reason why I mentioned that, and the reason why I got really excited about this at the beginning, and I'm going to put this in the chat box, is that, remember the geospatial revolution videos from 2010-ish? According to some of my colleagues over there at Penn State, they are creating a couple of new episodes, and that's grand news. But the original video had a very intriguing component. Some of you probably recall, where someone's got their smartphone, and this is 11 years ago, looking around. Oh, cafe, it's got 3 stars. Oh, lamppost, and it's got this amount of lumens. And I was thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be great someday if we could actually teach with some of those tools? And the IRSES Solutions and some of the things that you folks have shared today allow us to do that. We're really touching the future. This is pretty fun. All right, we've got just a little bit of time left. Here, let's do this. The GIS crossword puzzle. I created this for GIS Day last year, and it is actually pretty extensive. If you look at it, I have 400 clues in there. So if you truly are bored on a Saturday night, or you just want to amaze your friends, you could have a virtual session, for example, with this crossword puzzle. I'm just going to show you, or I'm just going to throw out 4 clues right now in our closing session. Keep us thinking spatially. 16 across, a spatial term denoting features that overlay or cross each other. A spatial term denoting features that overlay or cross each other. Okay, we're going to go through the answers. No worries there. 40 across, a type of thematic map in which the areas symbolized are in proportion to a variable that represents a summary of a geographic characteristic within each area. Okay, ponder that for a moment. 69 down. University of Kansas cartographer George, who devised the natural breaks classification. Rock Chalk, Jayhawks, University of Kansas. Oh, you folks are good. 295 down. The standard deviation of the residuals, or the prediction errors. Let's go to that GIS crossword, shall we? Just for a moment. Again, this is a way for, I'm trying to model some of the things that you could do to get your students excited about this in varied ways. Okay. 40 across. Choropleth, yep, type of thematic map. 69 down. Jenks, yes, many of you got that. Okay, good. What about the standard deviation of the residuals, prediction errors? RMSE. Okay, what about 16 across? Intersect. So, fascinating to be able to do this. And again, I've got all of the clues. I've got all the answers. Some of them are really hard because I know that you folks are the top-notch remote sensing educators. What's your favorite map? You knew I'd get to this one. What's your favorite map? We could have a lot of discussion on this. Even though this is a bit old now, this is almost 30 years old, this map, but the digital shaded relief of the USA. Thielen and Pike, USGS, my former employers. I love this. I know that sounds geeky. You love maps too, but this gives you, it's not an image. That's another thing to get students thinking about. It was the first mosaicked NED map, National Elevation Data Set, produced from the individual DEMs. And you can see things, sure, out west here, you can see in the west central part, the Snake River Plain, the lava fields, you can see the Wind River Range in Wyoming, you can see the Black Hills sort of standing out by themselves. But I like to look at more subtle things on the landscape. For example, the Coteau de Praire out in northeast South Dakota that you can see on the east side of this image where the glacial lobes divided. It's not very prominent when you're actually on the landscape. It's not a very high formation, but again, scale matters. From this scale, it is just fascinating. So you could teach about a lot of different, geomorphological kinds of things, and there's no obviously printing on here. So it's a very engaging kind of a map to show, and also talk about the technology. How did we mosaic this together in the first place? And that was 30 years ago. What can we do now that we couldn't do then? What about resolution of this image versus something else? I love that map. Thielen and Pike, 1992. Upcoming events, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but we've got the Education Summit happening in June that my team hosts. We'd love to have you back for that. The user conference in July, both of those are virtual. GIS Day in November, I'm sure that's on your calendar. GIS Day, some resources there. Even Shakespeare loved maps. And you say, well, prove it to me, Joseph. Okay, William Shakespeare, King Henry IV, Part 1, Act 3. Lord Mortimer and Cousin Glendower, will you sit down? And Uncle Worcester, a plague upon it, I have forgot the map. I have forgot the map. I love that. Okay, that was hard to pick out too, but another thing that threaded throughout the discussion today that I noticed was that there's this whole notion of, yes, we have wonderful data sets at our fingertips. And we want students to be critical consumers of the data, right? We want them to be critical consumers of the data. Why? Because we don't want them to just accept that data. Maps are representations. Images are representations of reality, right, folks? And if we can get the students to be critical thinkers, that to me is one of our higher and nobler goals. Yes, we love the tools. Yes, we love the data, but it's this tool, right? It's this tool that's the most important. This is the one you want to nurture. as was actually threaded throughout the discussion today. So I salute you all. And to that end, and I'm going to put this in the chat box, I have a data blog. I know that sounds super boring, a data blog, but stemming from my days working at all those federal agencies creating data, I'm very passionate about this topic. And one of the things that I have in there is a set of essays. It's called Spatial Reserves. And it came from an Esri press book that a colleague and I wrote. But every week we have, how do I find data? How do I know if it's any good? And societal issues, location, privacy, et cetera. And one of the things that I really have strived to do in this is give faculty and students short things to read and do that gets them interested in this topic and engaged in, again, interesting ways that are not boring because data can be a fairly dry topic. But here's everyday examples of being critical of data. So this is a couple months ago. George Mason University, do a search on it in your mobile device. Right underneath it, it says, simple Chinese fast food chain. Interesting. I thought GMU was a major research institution. What about this one? Oops. What's wrong with this picture? Now, to be fair to the publisher, a couple of colleagues and I wrote to them and said, you really need to flip that world map. It really does matter. And they did. So, but for a while, it was published like this. Speaking of the Internet of Things, I know it gets hot in Texas, but this is really hot, really windy, and the precipitation is like Noah's flood, okay? The only thing that's normal is pressure. So if you weren't being critical of the data, your data point in Cleburne, Texas, for a whole year before this was taken down and corrected, would have been this big spike in temperature, pressure, humidity, precipitation. So even these data feeds, right, you need to be critical of their source and their values. Now, I thought I was a pretty big Fab 4 fan, but look at this one. This is not spatial, but this is, I don't even know what these songs are. Penny Lance is in my ear. That's not even a real song. A Day in the Sky, Cans Buy Me Love. It's not even in an album, right? It's someone's misspelled playlist. So be critical of the data is the whole theme of that. And I encourage you to go into that at some time. Careers and skills. Got a couple minutes left here. I truly believe, and we could have a discussion about this in the coming weeks and months, but asking questions is the most critical skill that we want to nurture in students. Asking good questions. We at Esri, your organizations in academia and nonprofits, government, wherever you folks are representing, you want employees, you want people in your organizations that do the same thing, right? You're asking questions that your employer is not even asking. And I encourage students, ask questions that your instructor is not even asking you, right? So I think that is the most important, as well as these other things here. Esri is growing. GIS, geotechnologies, remote sensing is still growing. And I think that's an important message for students that, okay, we're not hiring as many people as we were a year and a half ago, but we're not reducing, right? We're still expanding because people still want the data that more than ever, they're starting to realize with the health crises and natural hazards and other things we're facing, this stuff actually matters. And we want the tools, we want the data. Take a look sometime at the job opportunities and float those before your students. Oftentimes, we've got a very engaging Esri careers page that probably many of you have seen that has a refreshed sort of a feel to it. And it's also got some very interesting jobs. A lot of times students think, unless I'm a software engineer, I can't work at Esri or a business partner or anything like that, or any organization like that, but not true. Not true. And our team is a great representation of that. We're educators. We're in education. We have people that have deep knowledge in other fields as well. And sure, we need programmers. We need software developers as well. But we need people in marketing. We need people in graphic design and so on. Okay. There's also the Young Professionals Network that I wanted to highlight here in the remaining minutes. Tell your students about this. This is a very vibrant community. And some of you remember in the 2019, which was the last time we had the face-to-face Esri user conference, that year and a couple years leading up to that year, the YPN folks, they just added so much energy and vibrancy to the overall GIS community. So it's very nice to see. Another way of introducing students to different kinds of career paths is my Geo Inspirations column in Directions magazine. I just published one today, thanks to Directions, on David Hansen, who's the CEO of GeoJob. And there's a wide variety of folks that I featured in there over the last 6 years or so. So some of them are podcasts, some of them are straight articles. So we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. Ways to keep moving forward. We're going to talk about press. We're going to talk about some story maps. We're going to talk about the Learn Lesson Library and others. So I'm going to save most of that for tomorrow in our remaining minutes. I'll just highlight something that I developed last fall. It's not the end all be all, but it's a series of videos called GIS Helps. GIS Helps. So GIS helps you get a job. GIS helps you be a critical thinker. GIS helps you be a spatial thinker. And the screenshot from this one is provides double benefits. So I've got my twin brother on there with me. I also referenced the song Double Lovin' by the Osmonds. It's probably the only video on the planet that has GIS and the Osmonds in the same video. FYI, the Osmonds was a band. Okay. Anyway, for those of you that don't know. All right. Last song, and then we're going to close out here. Yep. One more. And again, don't worry. I'm not going to give up my day job. I had a friend named Susie Cobb. She got herself a brand new job. She's the smartest person in this whole town. I found out at the Esri UC, Susie got her GIS PE. Don't you know where she can now be found? She's in the CART lab now. She's in the CART lab now. Yeah, she spends all her time making polygons, points, and lines. She's in the CART lab now. All right, I know we've got some real musicians on here, and you're probably saying, Joseph, why didn't you have me play? 3 final messages. This relates to my point earlier. This is an actual high school where I was running a geotech club after school. They're using a valued part of their not too distant past IT infrastructure as a doorstop. And the point is, don't get too attached to the tools, right? The tools will change, the methods, some of them will remain. But I think that the main thing is, this tool here, as I mentioned earlier, is the most important tool. Also, just to close out here, again, consider us as your industry partner moving forward. We learn so much from working and interacting with all of you. It's not a one-way street here. Learning about not just your success stories, but about real challenges that you face. Especially in these disruptive educational times, we really value your partnership. And we treasure you as a valued part of this remote sensing imagery community. And I just would like to say, truly, you're making a positive difference in people's lives. You really are. You're empowering these change agents of the future. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for what you contributed. And I think Jerry's got some messages for us to close us out here.
All right. Well, thank you, Joseph. I don't know how we capped this. This was absolutely lovely. Lovely ending of today. So thanks to Joseph for this last session and to all the panelists that helped made today possible. So just a little bit of logistics for tomorrow. We will start a little bit earlier than today. So we'll start at 8:30 Pacific time. Note that there's a separate Zoom meeting for tomorrow. It's not going to be the same one as today. And of course, we'll have more lightning talks, more sessions, more panels, more discussions in a similar manner. So we'll continue all of that in the spirit of the session as well. We'll post some resources. We'll go over a lot more resources tomorrow, especially since this was a trend that you folks expressed that you wanted to talk about this further. So we'll touch upon that tomorrow, and we'll put some of these links in the chat as we conclude today. But yeah, we wanted to say thank you. Thanks to all of you for making the session, for the wonderful questions, and to all of our hosts and moderators and panelists. And Lori, would you like to say some wrapping up words?
Sure, real quick. Thanks very much, Jerry. So yes, thank everyone for attending today. And I want to do a real quick special shout out to Dean Sarah Whiting. Sarah is the new Dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She's been with us all day today. And that is a home where Esri was born back in 1969. So We all owe all of you as educators a lifetime debt of gratitude for the difference that you've made in our lives and our careers. We're very grateful for you. So please be sure to come tomorrow. We're going to have a very rich agenda, as Jerry mentioned, and including the closing panel with everyone's favorite person at Esri, Dr. Dawn Wright, our chief scientist. So please be sure to join us again tomorrow. Thanks, Jerry.
All right. Thank you, Lori. And thanks everyone.